Hi, good morning. Today is January 30th. It is 9:05 Central Standard Time. It is Thursday. It's a very, very, very rainy and overcast day today. I am live on TikTok and I'm live on YouTube. I did set up my live, but it didn't go. Is it supposed to go automatically? Anyone in YouTube land, let me know because I had to set it up again to go live. Anywho, let's get streaming. Today is the Senate nomination hearings for Tulsi Gabbard, who is the director of national intelligence, or who's been nominated for the directorship of national intelligence, and also Kash Patel, who has been nominated for the position, the FBI director position. So I'm going to move this so you guys can see my screen. Sorry. I'll do that. And I'm going to be sharing. Let me get on here first. I'm going to have to take a look to see what that looks like. Okay. For now, you guys can look at my beautiful crystals. Louis, what are you doing? Okay. So Tulsi Gabbard was at one point she ran for president in 2016, and she's a Democratic senator right now of Hawaii. She ran in 2016 for president. She later dropped out, and she was also part of the Democratic National Committee. 2016, she dropped out, and most expected her to endorse Hillary Clinton, but she actually did not. She endorsed Bernie Sanders. So she was a huge ally, along with Nina Turner, senator from Ohio. And she went hard for Bernie. She did a really great job as a surrogate. She traveled quite a bit. Shortly after, she went on to Standing Rock. So she was really, really brought to the spotlight when she supported Bernie Sanders. She was a huge advocate. She demonstrated. She stayed at Standing Rock. She is a vet as well. She, I believe, was in the Army, I want to say. And she rallied around anti, for peace and justice, and avoiding all unnecessary wars, that kind of thing. Well, she kind of took a pivot. In that pivot, she started getting a little bit more war hawkish. At that point, she started losing support from Bernie Sanders and his movement after after Donald Trump won in 2016. So that's a little bit of her backstory. She is now currently the senator from Hawaii. I'm not sure if she changed her party affiliation or not. Thanks for the gift. But she is now supported Donald Trump in his campaign, and everyone thought that was a little weird, including the Democrats. So I expect there is talk that she's going to really have a hard time securing the nomination from the Democrats and from the Republicans, but for different reasons, right? Usually these Senate hearings, sorry. Let me pull this up before I go any further. We're going to do a little left turn. Sorry about that. Okay.
They put their names on arenas. We put ours on my lower back. So naturally, when they announced they'd be raising their prices due to inflation, we decided to deflate our prices.
All right, so
due
let's
to
go
not
back
hating.
to what I was
If this were one of their ads,
before.
they'd end
So,
it here with a happy customer.
like I said, she took
So we'll
a
end ours
right
with an angry
turn. I don't know at what
Oh,
intersection,
look at
but
the
she
angry goat.
surely did take a total right-wing pivot. And I think I had this. I'm trying to figure out logistics here. People.
Progress is a
Sorry.
philosophy, a choice, a reason to keep going. Introducing the next generation of Tonal. We took the smartest, most effective strength training system in the world and made it stronger.
So she took this
Now
right-wing
lift up to
pivot
250 pounds of
and
adaptive weight.
ran
Feel the perfect blend of
with
cardio and strength training.
Donald Trump.
And build muscle up to two
Well, not
times
ran with,
faster.
but supported him
This
during
is
his
progress
candidacy.
that powers progress.
And he
Tonal, power, progress.
It's fine that we have differences of
and
opinions
here we go.
on
This is the
policies and
Senate
programs.
Intelligence Committee. This is
I
Senator
suspect
Tom
some of
Cotton.
my
Like
Republican
I said,
colleagues
she stands
might
to
disagree with some of Mrs.
really get
Gabbard's
some
votes
guff
in
from
the House
both
of
sides,
Representatives.
actually.
Just as I suspect that some of my
And I
Democratic colleagues
anticipate the Democrats
might
talking about that.
criticize Ms. Gabbard's statements and actions
And
since she
she
saw the
has
light and left the
openly
Democratic Party.
supported
But I
Edward
sincerely
Snowden,
hope that no one today
and his
will
right
impugn
to
Ms.
be a
Gabbard's
whistleblower
patriotism
and not
and integrity.
not have to,
Second, I can only laugh
go to
at
Russia.
some critics
and
who say that Ms.
basically just
Gabbard
be
has
exonerated
unconventional
of those,
views.
charges.
No
So
doubt she has
I
some
anticipate her getting
unconventional views,
some
like her
backlash
criticism
from
of
the,
Barack Obama's
from the
regime change
Republicans on that.
interventions in Egypt and Libya.
Let's turn this.
But guess what? I opposed the disastrous interventions in Egypt and Libya as well. Mubarak was a longtime American partner, and Egypt was a linchpin of our security system in the Middle East. Gaddafi had been scared straight after we toppled the Taliban and Saddam Hussein. He turned over his weapons of mass destruction and cooperated against terrorists.
Senator Tom Cotton.
In return, we had lifted sanctions
He's the one who
and reestablished diplomatic
voted
ties.
no,
But President Obama intervened to
extending the
topple both
TikTok
regimes.
which was
And what
then
came next? The
overturned
Muslim
by-
Brotherhood in Egypt and dangerous chaos
So
in
he
Libya
has been the biggest
to this
advocate
day.
of
No one ever mistook
TikTok.
Mubarak
And the reason
or
being
Gaddafi
is that he
as the
has
little sisters
a
of the
lot
poor.
of stocks.
But let's not kid
in
ourselves.
TikTok.
The world is a dangerous place, not a church picnic. Ms. Gabbard understands this, which is why she also saw the problem with regime change interventions in these places. The vast number of governments throughout history and still today are not democratic. We may wish it were different and we can work to improve it, but that's the way the world is. If we only befriended nations that shared our system of government and our social and cultural sensibilities, well, we wouldn't have many friends. In a fallen world, we have to take our friends where we find them. No question, stable democracies make the most stable friends, but what matters in the end is less whether a country is democratic or non-democratic, and more whether the country is pro-American or anti-American. I'll confess that those views may be somewhat unconventional, but look at where conventional thinking has got us. Maybe Washington could use a little more unconventional thinking. And I'm sure that the Office of the Director of National Intelligence could use more unconventional thinking. Ms. Gabbard, I submit that if confirmed, the measure of your success will largely depend on whether you can return the ODNI to its original size, scope, and mission.
Tulsi Gabbard.
When Congress created the ODNI, we intended to put one office in charge to manage the different agencies of the intelligence community.
43 years old. She's
Congress
married.
intended the ODNI to be a very lean organization that would use small staffs to execute specific tasks.
And Liz,
Congress in no way wanted yet another unruly bureaucracy layered on top of an already bureaucratic intelligence community. Unfortunately, 20 years later, that's exactly what the ODNI has become. Incredibly, the ODNI now has is now larger than any agencies it was established to manage. It has 15 offices and centers, which have many subunits within them. The ODNI staff is measured in the thousands when it should be measured in the dozens or maybe a few hundred. I promise that's going to change. I intend to get personnel at the ODNI back to their home agencies doing real intelligence work, not bureaucratic make work. I also expect to cap the size of the ODNI. Ms. Gabbard, if confirmed, I hope you'll be a partner in these vital efforts. Another example of bureaucratic mission creep and empire building is what's come to be known in the intelligence community as DNI taxes. The ODNI levies these so-called taxes on other agencies, shifting and directing funds away from the intelligence community's core mission to the whims and fancies of any particular DNI. That practice, which seems to have grown and run rampant under Director Haynes, is also going to stop. Ms. Gabbard, if confirmed, you have a lot of work ahead of you. And as chairman of this committee, I'm committed to ensuring that we see it all the way through. At this moment, I'll now recognize Senator Risch for a brief statement.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. And I want to thank Ms. Gabbard for meeting with me and having the candid conversation we did on the issues. Unfortunately, I have to chair the Foreign Relations Committee. We have our first substantive meeting today on malign influence of China here at home and abroad. So I'm not going to be able to stay for the hearing. I'm not going to get a chance to ask questions. However, we are going to have a closed session immediately following, and the questions I have trespass upon the security of the country, and as a result of that, they need to be done in a classified setting in any event. So if I beg indulgence to be excused to preside over the other committee. Good luck. I know you'll do well. Thank you.
You are excused.
I was going to leave whether you excuse me or not, but thank you very much.
I will now recognize the Vice Chairman, Senator Warner, for his opening remarks.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and particularly thank your comments at the top. I've spent most of the morning at National Airport. I know Senator Moran was there last night. It's a horrible tragedy.
they're referring to the
Victims' families are still being notified. For those of us who live in this region, you know, it's
last night.
always kind of complicated. We've got Virginia, DC, Maryland, and a host of local jurisdictions. But last night, when this tragedy took place, and I happened to be driving by National on the way home and saw all the first responders rushing to the scene. People came from as far away as Baltimore, Fairfax County. We had DOD and federal officials there. And these first responders, as always, ran towards the tragedy. There'll be a time to figure out what happened and how we rectify it. But today, our thoughts and prayers ought to be with the families and, again, thanking our first responders. Ms. Gabbard, welcome. And congratulations on your nomination to be the next Director of National Intelligence. I'd like to begin by thanking you, literally, for your decades of public service,
Right now, RFK is
both in
also
uniform
in the
and
middle
as a
of
member
a
of Congress from Hawaii.
hearing.
I applaud your continuing commitment to serve should you be confirmed. Now, the President has nominated you to be Director of National Intelligence. Most folks probably don't understand the importance of this position. If confirmed, you would lead 18 agencies
Wow.
of the IC. You'll also serve as the principal advisor to the President, the National Security Council, and the Homeland Security
Huge
Council for
position.
all intelligence matters related to national security. And in this role, you'll be responsible for over $100 billion between the National Intelligence Program and the Military Intelligence Program, or the NIP and the MIP as we call them here. It's a position of great importance and significance to our national security, created after one of our worst national security failures, 9/11. For that reason, when Congress established this position, thanks in large part to our colleague and our friend Susan Collins, it mandated in law that any individual nominated for this position must have, and I quote, extensive national security expertise. Now, I appreciated you taking the time to meet with me. And as I noted in that office, both before and after, I continue to have significant concerns about your judgment and your qualifications to meet the standards set by law. First, as I noted previously, the DNI was created in part to make sure we had appropriate intelligence sharing, which prior to 9/11, obviously we haven't. But the mission also is to not only share information between the IC, but also with our allies. There's no legal requirement that our allies share intelligence with us. It's all predicated on trust. Trust that our allies will protect each other's secrets. It appears to me you have repeatedly excused our adversaries' worst actions.
Yeah.
And instead, often blame them on the United States and those very allies. For example, you blame NATO for Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine. You rejected the conclusion that Assad used chemical weapons in Syria, despite it being the unanimous assessment of the then Trump administration's DOD, State Department, and IC, as well as the assessment of our European allies. Instead, you blame the United States for supporting terrorist groups in Syria. Now, I don't know if your intent in making those statements was to defend those dictators, or if you were simply unaware of the intelligence and how your statements would be perceived. In either case, it raises, at least for this senator, serious questions about your judgment. It also leads me to question whether you can develop the trust necessary to give our allies confidence that they can share their most sensitive intelligence with us. Make no mistake about it. If they stop sharing that intelligence, the United States will be less safe. We've seen this as recently as this past year, where because of those strong intelligence sharing between the United States and Austria, countless lives were saved by disrupting a terrorist attack that was going to take place at the Taylor Swift concert in Vienna. Second, you have been publicly outspoken in your praise and defense of Edward Snowden, someone who betrayed the trust of our nation and jeopardized the security of our country. The truth is, the vast majority of the information he stole and leaked before running off to China and Russia, might I add, had nothing to do with Americans' privacy and compromised our most important sources and methods. And in many ways, we're still paying a price for that. And I believe that Edward Snowden's action put our men and women in uniform in places like Iraq and Afghanistan at risk. You have celebrated Snowden as a, quote, brave whistleblower, and actually put forward legislation asking for his pardon. Furthermore, when given the opportunity to clarify your position in pre-hearing questions, you declined. And instead you expressed, and again, I quote, the DNI has no role in determining whether or not Edward Snowden is a lawful whistleblower. Well, that is troubling to me in so many ways. Not only do you think that someone who divulged secrets and then ran off to Russia should be celebrated as brave, but you don't seem to understand the DNI's role in determining whistleblower determinations. In fact, the DNI has a significant role in transmitting lawful whistleblower complaints to this committee. They're all laid out right here in the statute. And I would have serious concerns about confirming someone who cannot distinguish between complaints that are made lawfully and those that are made not. In the statute, it says the job of the DNI is to protect intelligence sources and methods from unauthorized disclosure. That's a quote. I guess I'm asking, what message would it send to have a DNI who would celebrate the work of a member of the IC or a contractor that would, on their own mission, decide what's appropriate to leak. I don't understand that. Third, until recently, you had a clear and consistent record of opposing FISA 702. I know members on this committee already understand how important this is, but for folks who don't, this law is critical to our national security. Literally 60% on average of what goes into the president's daily brief, what President Trump will read each day in assessing what's going on in the world, comes from this important piece of law that allows us to seek out those foreigners abroad for coverage. And it's helped prevent terrorist attacks. It helps us prevent foreign cyber attacks. It helps us on a topic that a lot of folks are looking at, fentanyl trafficking. Now, many in this Congress and many on the committee have tried to reform this legislation to better balance security and civil liberties. However, you have consistently gone further. Not only did you vote against reauthorizing 702, you actually introduced legislation to fully repeal the whole thing, calling it again, quote, a blatant disregard for our Fourth Amendment constitutional rights. Now, I understand that since you've been nominated to be DNI, you've expressed a change of heart. I think that's welcome, but I have to tell you, as I view this as a job interview, as I try to make my judgment on whether you should be confirmed, I don't find your change of heart credible. Because the world today is more complex and more dangerous than ever before. And we need serious people with sufficient experience to be able to navigate that complexity. I hope you use this opportunity to address my concerns and all of the members of this committee. I appreciate again your service, and I'm looking forward to a thorough discussion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. We welcome back Senator Richard Burr, the former chairman of this committee who has emerged from retirement, to introduce Ms. Gabbard. Yet still in retirement, he still seems unable to find a pair of socks. Nonetheless, we say thank you and welcome you back, Senator Burr.
Some things are very predictable, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman Cotton, Vice Chairman Warner, members of this distinguished committee, I want to thank you for allowing me to join you today to provide my thoughts and support on behalf of Tulsi Gabbard's nomination to be Director of National Intelligence. This is my first visit back to the Senate in slightly over 2 years. Permit me to say, from this side of the dais, you're not as intimidating as I thought when I was on your side of the dais. When I was chairman of this committee, Senator Warner and I stuck to a single refrain with our staff: follow the facts wherever they lead. Today, an anonymous person or group launching a campaign using rumors as sources and accusations as fact can drive the outcome of an election and of public opinion. I know it to be true. Remember, I sat in your chair for the Russia investigation, where we found much of the influence to be the result of fictitious narratives driven by Russia. Now, some of you may be wondering, why do I support Tulsi Gabbard and why am I here to introduce her as a nominee? I've experienced firsthand a coordinated attempt to influence this nominee's support in the United States Senate and with the American people. I was contacted by several national journalists shortly after the president nominated Tulsi, asking me to confirm one of the many rumors circulating about this nominee. I informed each journalist over a 5-week period that the rumors shared with me was simply not true. This narrative was shared from one journalist to the next journalist to the next journalist. I assume today they ran out of journalists. This was a coordinated effort to kill this nomination. Advise and consent is the responsibility of the United States Senate, and I truly believe that each member takes it seriously. All members of this committee were offered the opportunity for individual meetings with Tulsi, and if you chose not to meet with her, it's on you. I've done my homework, and here are the facts. Tulsi Gabbard's historic life began at birth. She's the first American Samoan-born member of Congress, period. She graduated from Hawaii Pacific University with a degree in business administration with a concentration in international business. In 2002, at age 21, Tulsi became the youngest woman in America ever elected as a state representative. That was not enough. In 2003, she joined the Hawaii National Guard. When deployed, in her re-election, her opponent raised the issue, could you serve the people that elected you if in fact you were deployed? What did Tulsi do? She withdrew from her re-election campaign in order to continue to serve our country in the war on terror. This would not be the first or the last time Tulsi put her country above her career. After multiple deployments and serving in the Hawaii City Council, she was elected to the United States House of Representatives, where she served 4 terms. Throughout her political career, she maintained her military service either in the National Guard or the Army Reserve. Media stories and anonymous rumors have questioned her qualifications, her patriotism, and whether she can be trusted, just to name a few. I refuse to question the qualifications of a woman who's worn the uniform of her nation for 22 years and never taken it off. No fewer than 5 times has the Department of Defense reviewed her security clearance and extended it. Every single time. If Tulsi's guilty of anything, it's that since she was born, her views, opinions, and beliefs have evolved to reflect her life's experiences. Winston Churchill once said, "Those that never change their minds never change anything." She served her city, her state, her country, while winning the support of the people she represented.
Thanks.
She's fought in war, and yes, she's tried to stop wars. At the ripe age of 43, Tulsi has the life experiences that match or exceed most members of Congress. Tulsi was serving in uniform 3 years before some of us here today voted to create the Director of National Intelligence. Chairman Cotton, Vice Chairman Warner, members of the committee, it's my honor to support and to introduce to the committee Lieutenant Colonel Tulsi Gabbard. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Burr. Now our colleague, Senator Joni Ernst of Iowa, has taken a few minutes out of her very busy schedule to be here to introduce Ms. Gabbard as well. Senator Ernst.
Thank you, Chairman Cotton and Ranking Member Warner. And good morning to my distinguished colleagues. I also do want to take a moment this morning to recognize the lives that were lost in the collision near DCA last night. It is a truly heartbreaking tragedy. My prayers are with the victims' families and their loved ones. So thank you. Duty, honor, service. These are not just words. They are principles that have guided Lieutenant Colonel Gabbard. As a young enlisted soldier in the Hawaii National Guard, Tulsi answered the call to duty upon her deployments to the Middle East. From graduating at the top of her class from the Accelerated Officer Candidate School at the Alabama Military Academy, the first woman to do so, to serving as the youngest member of Hawaii's legislature, she upheld honor while breaking barriers both in uniform and in her civilian leadership roles. And today, Lieutenant Colonel Gabbard demonstrates her commitment to service by sitting before this committee, prepared to answer the nation's call yet once again, this time as the next Director of National Intelligence. Tulsi and I share similar backgrounds, both to our nation and to our communities. We've worn the same uniforms, serving in the Army National Guard and Army Reserves, leading battalions and deploying to Iraq and Kuwait. We've both had the privilege of serving in our state legislatures and in Congress, representing the people who shaped our lives and our communities. Tulsi exemplifies what it means to rise above partisanship, putting the needs of the American people over political divisions. She put her own life on the line in combat operations and now has set aside partisan differences as a former Democrat member of Congress to answer the call to serve in a Republican administration. The mainstream media has fought to paint their own picture of Tulsi Gabbard. But let's talk about the real Tulsi Gabbard, the woman and the soldier who I've come to know and respect. And I've known Tulsi for the past decade. Relationships matter. In 2015, then Congresswoman Gabbard met my dear friend Owen, who was a dear friend of mine from Iowa State University. Owen was a wounded special operations warrior who embodies the resilience and strength of our military community. Owen was the subject of an attack in Afghanistan, where he lost his leg and his left eye serving in the war. After this attack, or during this attack, Owen was tossed into the dead pile. Owen, bleeding and in excruciating pain, cried out to his teammates, "I'm not dead." Thankfully, his fellow warfighter attended to Owen. But the road to recovery was long and hard, including a stint at Walter Reed Medical Center. During this time, Owen met a fellow warrior and patriot, Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, who became a friend, and today they remain in touch. Owen prides himself in being a very good judge of character. And Tulsi, he speaks volumes of your character. Owen's final message to me before this hearing was, Tulsi has maintained her integrity throughout her career. She's the same gal I met in 2015. She always makes time for our old, broken warriors. And colleagues, I will leave you with this. You know me. I trust Tulsi Gabbard. She will be honest with you. She will listen to your concerns. She will be receptive to your feedback. And rest assured, Lieutenant Colonel Gabbard loves this country, a fact proven by her willingness to put her life on the line to defend it. For over 20 years, she has put on the uniform and checked her political views at the door with one mission in mind: to protect and defend our great United States of America. Tulsi, duty, honor, and service have marked your life. Thank you for your extraordinary dedication to our nation, for embodying the values that make our military the best in the world, and for stepping up to serve yet once again as President Trump's Director of National Intelligence. Relationships matter. I urge my colleagues to support this nomination. My best wishes to you, Tulsi, and to your family. God bless our country. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Ernst. I know that Senator Ernst has a busy schedule to include a hearing for Dan Driscoll, the Secretary of Army nominee at the Armed Services Committee. I'm sure Senator Burr has to go on a fishing trip or something. So we will excuse both senators from the witness table.
He's so funny.
Ms. Gabbard, before we move to your opening statement, it is the custom of the committee to ask a series of obligatory questions to all nominees. First, do you swear or affirm to give this committee your full and truthful testimony?
I do.
Second, do you agree to appear before the committee here or in other venues when invited?
Yes.
Third, if confirmed, do you agree to send officials from your office to appear before the committee and designated staff when invited?
Yes.
Fourth, do you agree to provide documents or any materials requested by the committee in order for it to carry out its oversight and legislative responsibilities?
I do.
Fifth, will you ensure that your office and your staff provide such material to the committee when requested?
Yes.
Sixth, do you agree to inform and fully brief, to the fullest extent possible, all members of this committee on intelligence activities and covert actions rather than only the chairman and the vice chairman?
Yes.
Thank you for those answers, Ms. Gabbard. We now welcome the opportunity, finally, to hear from you in your own words.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Before I begin, I too would like to start by offering my prayers and condolences to those who were killed in last night's horrific crash. Senator Warner, Senator Moran, our condolences and prayers are with you and all of your constituents. Again, Chairman Cotton, Vice Chairman Warner, and all of the members of the committee, it's an honor to be here before you today. I've appreciated the opportunity to meet with so many of you and address your questions and concerns before today's hearing. I know they've gone, but I'm grateful to Senators Burr and Ernst for their trust and their confidence in taking time to join us here today. To my husband, Abraham, my family, friends, fellow veterans, Medal of Honor recipients, and patriots, thank you for your love and support. I'm honored and grateful to President Trump for his trust and confidence in nominating me to serve our country as the Director of National Intelligence at a time when trust in the intelligence community, unfortunately, is at an all-time low. Chuck Schumer admitted a few years ago, quote, "You take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you." For too long, faulty, inadequate, or weaponized intelligence have led to costly failures and the undermining of our national security and God-given freedoms enshrined in the Constitution. The most obvious example of one of these failures is our invasion of Iraq based upon a total fabrication or complete failure of intelligence. This disastrous decision led to the deaths of tens of thousands of American soldiers, millions of people in the Middle East, mass migration, destabilization, and undermining of the security and stability of our European allies, the rise of ISIS, strengthening of Al-Qaeda and other Islamist jihadist groups, and strengthening Iran. Here are just a few other examples. The American people elected Donald Trump as their president not once but twice, and yet the FBI and intelligence agencies were politicized by his opponents to undermine his presidency and falsely portray him as a puppet of Putin. Title I of FISA was used illegally to obtain a warrant to spy on Trump campaign advisor Carter Page, using a Clinton campaign-funded false dossier as their so-called evidence. Biden campaign advisor Tony Blinken was the impetus for the 51 former senior intelligence officials' letter dismissing Hunter Biden's laptop as disinformation specifically to help Biden win the election. Former DNI James Clapper lied to this committee in 2013, denying the existence of programs that facilitated the mass collection of millions of Americans' phone and internet records, yet was never held accountable. Under John Brennan's leadership, the CIA abused its power to spy on Congress, to dodge oversight, lied about doing it until he was caught, and yet has never been held responsible. Under Biden, the FBI abused its power for political reasons to try to surveil Catholics who attend traditional Latin Mass, labeling them as quote-unquote radical traditionalist Catholics. Personally, just 24 hours after I criticized Kamala Harris and her nomination, I was placed on a secret domestic terror watch list called Quiet Skies. Sadly, there are more examples. The bottom line is this must end. President Trump's reelection is a clear mandate from the American people to break this cycle of failure, end the weaponization and politicization of the intelligence community, and begin to restore trust in those who've been charged with the critical task of securing our nation. If confirmed as DNI, I will do my very best to fulfill this mandate and bring leadership to the intelligence community with a laser-like focus on our essential mission, ensuring the safety, security, and freedom of the American people. As the President's principal intelligence advisor, I'll begin by leading by example, checking my own personal views at the door, and committing to delivering intelligence that is collected, analyzed, and reported without bias, prejudice, or political influence. I enlisted in the Army because of the horrific terrorist attack on September 11th and volunteered to deploy to Iraq in 2005, where I served in a medical unit. After nearly 22 years in uniform with 3 combat deployments to the Middle East and Africa, I'm now a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army Reserve, where I serve as a battalion commander of soldiers in Oklahoma, Missouri, and Arkansas. I served in Congress for 8 years on the Homeland Security, Foreign Affairs, and Armed Services committees. And it's my experience in the military and in the halls of Congress that have given me a deep understanding of the complex challenges that our nation faces, in both roles engaging with world leaders, in both roles being privy to highly classified intelligence. So I know firsthand how essential accurate, unbiased, and timely intelligence is to the President, to Congress, and to our warfighters. I also know the heavy cost of intelligence failures and abuses. Senator Collins, you led the creation of ODNI specifically to address those intelligence failures of 9/11 and Iraq's so-called WMDs. The need for the ODNI under strong leadership still exists today. If confirmed, I'll bring my experience and fresh eyes to leading the intelligence community. And my day one priorities will be to assess the global threat environment, identify where gaps in our intelligence exist, integrate intelligence elements, increase information sharing, and ensure that unbiased, apolitical, objective collection and analysis to support the President and policymakers' decision-making occur. I'll work to end the politicization of the intelligence community and ensure there is a clear mission focus in the IC on its core mission of this unbiased, apolitical collection and analysis of intelligence to secure our nation. I'll work to rebuild trust through transparency and accountability. This is a national security imperative. And I'll work to assess and address efficiencies, redundancies, and effectiveness across ODNI to ensure focus of personnel and resources is on our core mission of national security. In my meetings that I've had with many of you, you expressed bipartisan frustration about recent intelligence failures, as well as the lack of responsiveness to your requests for information. Whether it's the surprise October 7th Hamas terrorist attack, to the sudden takeover of Syria by Islamist extremists, failures to identify the source of COVID, anomalous health incidents, UAPs, drones, and more. If confirmed, I look forward to working with you to address these issues. Ensuring the safety, security, and freedom of the American people is a mandate of leadership that rises above partisan politics. If confirmed, my commitment to the President, to you, and to the American people is this: I will do my very best to find the truth, no matter where it leads, and share that truth with President Trump, his advisors, and you in Congress, providing you with that unbiased, timely, and accurate intelligence as you make the tough decisions that will impact the safety, security, and freedom of the American people. Now, before I close, I want to warn the American people who are watching at home. You may hear in this hearing that'll challenge my loyalty to and my love for our country. Those who oppose my nomination imply that I am loyal to something or someone other than God, my own conscience, and the Constitution of the United States, accusing me of being Trump's puppet, Putin's puppet, Assad's puppet, a guru's puppet, Modi's puppet, not recognizing the absurdity of simultaneously being the puppet of 5 different puppet masters. The same tactic was used against President Trump and failed. The American people elected President Trump with a decisive victory and mandate for change. The fact is, what truly unsettles my political opponents is I refuse to be their puppet. I have no love for Assad or Gaddafi or any dictator. I just hate al-Qaeda. I hate that we have leaders who cozy up to Islamist extremists, minimizing them to so-called rebels. As Jake Sullivan said to Hillary Clinton, quote, al-Qaeda is on our side in Syria. Well, Syria is now controlled by an al-Qaeda offshoot, HTS, led by an Islamist jihadist who danced in the streets on 9/11, who is responsible for the killing of many American service members. Democrat senators in the past resorted to anti-Christian bigotry against some of President Trump's judicial nominees like Amy Coney Barrett and Brian Boucher. I condemn those actions as a Democrat in Congress at the time, as religious bigotry must be thoroughly condemned by all of us, no matter the religion. Unfortunately, there are some Democrat senators who still don't understand the principle of freedom of religion and Article 6 of the Constitution. Quote, no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States. Unfortunately, they're once again using the religious bigotry card, but this time trying to foment religious bigotry against Hindus and Hinduism. If anyone is sincerely interested in knowing more about my own personal spiritual path of Hinduism, I welcome you to go to my account on X, where I'll share more on this topic. If confirmed as Director of National Intelligence, I will continue to live by the oath that I have sworn at least 8 times in my life, both in uniform and as a member of Congress. I will support and defend our God-given freedoms enshrined in the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same. Thank you very much for your time. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Gabbard. A few reminders before we begin our 5-minute round of questioning. First, a reminder to the audience, once again, I will not tolerate disruptions or disturbances, either in favor of or in opposition to Ms. Gabbard. We all came to hear from Ms. Gabbard, not from you. 2 reminders to my colleagues. We'll have a 5-minute round of questions. Not 5.5, not 6, 5-minute round. We will also have a closed session after this hearing in which you'll have another 5-minute opportunity to ask questions. Second, if any question, as Senator Risch alluded to, begins to approach the line of classified material, my crack staff will advise me and I will ask you to hold the question until we get to a closed setting.
Mr. Chairman, could I just inquire? I was under the understanding that if in the open round, because this is the only time the American people will be able to see this judgment, you'd agreed if certain members needed to ask a second round of questions in the public setting, that would be available.
As is our custom, if a member waits until the end of the opening round and has a follow-up question, then we will permit that follow-up question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Gabbard, if confirmed, you'll be entrusted with our nation's most important secrets. We're all entrusted with that information to serve the American people and to keep our country safe. Unfortunately, as you said in your opening statement, we've seen too many instances in recent years of people who were trusted with classified information and went on to abuse and politicize that trust. For example, in October 2020, more than 50 former intelligence officers, many of whom still held a top secret clearance, wrote a letter invoking their credentials to make false claims about Hunter Biden's laptop, likely being Russian disinformation. Do you agree that this was an example of intelligence professionals abusing and politicizing their past positions and credentials?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I do. And it is an example of what needs to end and why the American people elected President Trump to bring about those necessary reforms.
Thank you. Will you commit that no one who abuses his past position and credentials in this fashion will hold a security clearance in the future?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, I want to be fair to my Democratic colleagues. Such abuses aren't just a problem on the left. Also in 2020, President Trump's former national security advisor, John Bolton, published a book in which he revealed sensitive conversations with the president on national security matters, including highly classified information. He didn't submit this book for review and approval to ensure that our national security secrets were protected. Do you agree that John Bolton's actions likewise undermine public trust?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Will you commit that no one who so abuses his past position and risks the exposure of classified information by publishing a book without submitting it for review and getting approval before publication will hold a security clearance again or be trusted with classified information again?
Yes.
Thank you. Let's move on to the topic of ODNI reform that I mentioned in my opening statement. Congress originally envisioned the ODNI to be a small coordinating agency that directs rather than replicates the now 18 constituent agencies that make up our intelligence community. Over the years, however, the ODNI has strayed from this vision to an organization that now publicly boasts nearly 2,000 people, more than half of whom are not detailed from an intelligence agency, but rather are career ODNI bureaucrats. They've even developed centers that are producing their own analysis. Will you commit today to working with this committee to restoring the ODNI to its original size, scope, and function?
Yes, Senator, I look forward to working with you and the committee as I, if confirmed, assess the current status of who is working in the ODNI and the function that they fulfill to make sure of its effectiveness and elimination of redundancies and bloating.
Thank you. Do you support some of the policy proposals I mentioned in my opening statement about capping the size of the ODNI, eliminating ODNI taxes, returning employees back to their home agencies to do real intelligence work?
Yes, Senator, I look forward to working with you as we assess where the ODNI needs to be in order to fulfill its core mission and function.
Thank you. And in your preparation for this hearing and this important responsibility, have you developed any thoughts that explains the mission creep and the empire building that we've seen at the ODNI in recent years?
Yes, Senator, I've had the opportunity to review the history of the ODNI, to speak to Ambassador Negroponte, the first Director of National Intelligence, as well as others who have served in this position. I think there are a number of contributing factors to the creation of centers, or not centers, but offices like the recently eliminated Office of DEI within ODNI, and other areas where I need to go in and assess the replication and the duplication of responsibilities that exist elsewhere and some of the other intelligence elements that ODNI has oversight over.
Thank you. Colleagues, I will lead by example and yield back 1 minute of my time and recognize the Vice Chair.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. That is a first. Ms. Gabbard, let me be clear, at least in my views. I salute your service to our country, but I have serious doubts about your judgment. And those are some of the areas that I want to pursue. First, until you are nominated by the president to be the DNI, you consistently praise the actions of Edward Snowden. Some who, I believe, jeopardized the security of our nation and then, in an effort to flaunt that, fled to Russia. You even called Edward Snowden, and I quote here, a brave whistleblower. Every member of this committee supports the rights of legal whistleblowers. But Edward Snowden isn't a whistleblower. And in this case, I'm a lot closer to the chairman's words, where he said Snowden is, quote, an egotistical serial liar and traitor who, quote, deserves to rot in jail for the rest of his life. Ms. Gabbard, a simple yes or no question. Do you still think Edward Snowden is brave?
Mr. Vice Chairman, Edward Snowden broke the law. I do not agree with or support with all of the information and intelligence that he released, nor the way in which he did it. There would have been opportunities for him to come to you on this committee or seek out the IG to release that information. The fact is, he also, even as he broke the law, released information that exposed egregious, illegal, and unconstitutional programs that are happening within our government.
Excuse me, Ms. Gabbard.
That led to serious reforms that Congress undertook.
Chairman, we got 5 minutes. So I take your answer, and these are your quotes.
This doesn't
Brave,
for her.
please join my bipartisan legislation calling for charges to be dropped against him. Do you disagree that legislation was not appropriate Do you believe he is brave or not?
Yeah,
Back those words?
once again, Senator, Edward Snowden broke the law. He
Ms. Gabbard,
also
I'm not
released
talking- we
information
agree that Snowden
that
broke the law.
exposed the United States
Asking you a question
government's
whether
illegal
your
programs.
legislation and your words are still your beliefs. Yes or no, please?
I'm making myself very clear. Edward
Ma'am.
Snowden broke the law. He released information about the United States
Ma'am, I've
government's
got other issues to
illegal
raise. Ma'am,
activities.
I
If I may just finish my thoughts, Senator. In this role that I've been nominated for, if confirmed as Director of National Intelligence, I will be responsible for protecting our nation's secrets. And I have 4 immediate steps that I would take to
Chairman.
prevent another Snowden-like leak.
ma'am, I would simply ask you again.
Serious.
I don't think you're going to answer. I agree with Tom Cotton. He's a traitor. You, for years, until you got chosen by President Trump, have celebrated this guy as brave. You've called for him to be pardoned, for his charges to be dropped. I cannot imagine a director of national intelligence that would say that kind of behavior is okay. How would we maintain the trust of the IC and the contractors who work for it? How would we maintain the trust of our Five Eye partners? I find it very troubling. Let me move to 702. I know other members are going to raise this. Remember, the 702 is critical to our national security. 60% of the president's daily brief, 60% of the information President Trump gets every day in a PDB will come from this. You've had a long history of opposing 702. Many members of Congress have. But one of the things you actually done that not many have is not to reform it, but you actually said you wanted to repeal it. But now, whether it's confirmation conversion or whatever, you call 702 vital. And I'm quoting, because of significant FISA reforms have been enacted since you left Congress. Ms. Gabbard, what are the reforms that have led you to now support 702?
In the short time that I have, Senator, I will just note that my actions in legislation in Congress were done to draw attention to the egregious civil liberties violations that were occurring at that time.
Ms. Gabbard, Ms. Gabbard, I ask you a question. Please give me the courtesy of responding. You said the reforms now make you support it. What can you cite? Which reforms?
There are a number of reforms to include
In the new
getting
bill,
rid
in the new law,
that,
right?
that all of you and your
Gabbard,
wisdom.
my time is getting short.
Foreign
I
intelligence.
gotta just tell you,
from
after the reforms were
non-US
passed into
persons
law
abroad.
in April of 24, you went on Joe Rogan's podcast in May.
And now, I mean, even
The bill is now law.
is saying that.
And you said,
she wanted to
quote,
repeal 702.
this bill took an already bad problem
She does.
and made it many, many times worse.
For providing 702.
Again,
Or
in my mind, this is a question of judgment.
collect
702 is critical.
under 702.
I appreciate this late conversion, but I'm not sure I buy it because you've had such a consistent position.
Really hitting
Again,
home.
I know my colleague's going to raise these, but rather than standing up to dictators like
Really
Putin and Assad,
Pivot and quickly.
you've sometimes amplified his talking points. I mean, I just do not understand how you can blame NATO for Putin's brutal invasion of Ukraine. And when Assad used chemical weapons against his own people, you didn't condemn him. I can go through all the quotes. You actually questioned Americans' intelligence. Now, you mentioned a lot about trust. And one of the things that I'm so proud on this committee is my friend Senator Burr said, we always follow the truth. I say on this committee, the most valuable work I do in this, and we have a bipartisan approach to intelligence. I think we have worked to try to keep the intelligence community and earn their trust, and frankly, earn the trust of the American people.
Senate hearing, and I'm also live on
Respectfully,
on YouTube.
ma'am, I just don't believe on your judgment and credibility issues that this is the appropriate role that you should take going forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Gabbard, Edward Snowden does stand out as having done particularly grave harm to our national security by revealing top secret information, including sensitive sources and methods, thus jeopardizing agents in the field. So let me ask you a question. If confirmed, would you support or recommend a pardon or any kind of clemency for Edward Snowden?
Thank you for the question, Senator Collins. If confirmed as the Director of National Intelligence, my responsibility would be to ensure the security of our nation's secrets and would not take actions to advocate for any actions related to Snowden.
So the answer is no. Is that
Correct.
correct? In 2020, you introduced the Protect Brave Whistleblowers Act, which would amend the Espionage Act to make it more difficult to prosecute individuals who reveal classified information. In particular, the bill would allow individuals to disclose even top secret information as long as it's not done with the specific intent to injure the United States or advantage any foreign nation. Your bill would also have created an affirmative defense if public disclosure of classified information were made for several reasons, one of which was to expose gross waste of funds. I strongly oppose this legislation, which would hamper our ability to prosecute people who give our adversaries classified information. So let me ask you this, Ms. Gabbard, do you still support providing individuals who have access to top secret information with the ability to make their own decisions regarding whether that information should be publicly disclosed, even though disclosure may cause tremendous harm to our country or our allies?
Senator, we cannot and should not have individual vigilantes within the intelligence community making their own decisions about how and where and when to expose our nation's secrets. The intent of the legislation that you have pointed out was pointed towards ensuring due process for those who are charged under the Espionage Act in a court of law. This is a law that has been abused in some cases and used for political purposes. President Obama charged more people under the Espionage Act than all other presidents combined. If confirmed as the Director of National Intelligence, my sole focus and goal would be our nation's security, which includes ensuring the security of our nation's secrets. And I would work to make sure that we don't have any disclosures or vigilantes taking it upon themselves. There are numerous legal paths that will protect this information for those who feel they have concerns. And I look forward to working with you and this committee on making sure that those protections are known by every single person in the workforce and effectively implemented.
So you do not support allowing individuals to make their own decisions without authorization to disclose secret information, classified information?
Yes, and I believe we have the legal structure in place for those who have concerns to address them.
As you know, there has been speculation in the press that you met with Hezbollah, a terrorist organization affiliated with Iran. Have you ever knowingly met with any members, leaders, or affiliates of Hezbollah?
No, and it is an absurd accusation.
Let me ask you one final question in the short time we have left. With Hamas, ISIS-K, the Houthis, all the Iranian proxies in Syria and Iraq, Yemen, and Al-Qaeda all posing general resurgences in the Middle East, Africa, and Central Asia, I'm alarmed at the lack of focus by the IC on this threat to our safety. We don't want to have to call you back to this room after a terrorist attack and ask, how did the IC miss this? Great power competition China, Russia definitely pose threats to our country, but the terrorist threat is arguably the most imminent threat, according to former FBI Director Chris Wray. If confirmed, what would be your strategy to refocus the IC on the terrorist threat to our country and to Americans abroad?
Thank you, Senator. I agree with your assessment, and this speaks to the need for the ODNI to exist, to redirect those resources, identifying the gaps in intelligence so that we are able to get ahead of these threats instead of coming around after the fact and trying to assess why did we not know about this sooner so that we could have taken action to prevent it.
Thank you.
Senator Wyden.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Ms. Gabbard.
Thank you.
I am going to try to get 4 questions in, so I'll be brief, and if you can reciprocate, that would be very much appreciated. We've been talking about Section 702, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, and I believe it's critical that the DNI support additional reforms to protect the privacy of law-abiding Americans. In your written response to committee questions, you wrote, and I quote, "Warrants should generally be required before an agency undertakes a U.S. person query of Section 702. Is this your current position?"
Yes, it is, Senator. And as you'll note in that written response, I noted some exigent circumstances with which there may be other options. But I also want to make a note that a simple warrant requirement is ultimately going to be a policy decision that all of you will make. I would point to history, to some examples.
Time is short. I'm glad you answered in line with your written answer that you support a warrant. Section 702 also involves a huge loophole now that was included recently that could allow the government to force anyone with access to a Wi-Fi router or cable box to secretly participate in the warrantless surveillance program. Do you support, as I do, eliminating this language?
Senator, I would have to look more into that and assess, if confirmed, what the impacts of the implementation of the existing safeguards are and come back to you in Congress as you look at reauthorization.
It is a massive loophole, and I hope to hear after you've looked at it that you'll be supportive of my efforts. Let me turn now to the question of the Inspector General situation. Can the President of the United States refuse to fund the Inspector General for the intelligence community despite appropriations from Congress? And here I'd like a yes or no.
Senator, I don't know about the legal authorities, but I understand the essential role that the inspectors general play. And if confirmed, look forward to empowering our Inspector General to fulfill their responsibility.
Good, because Congress either has the power of the purse or it doesn't. And I think in your answer to me, you recognize that you have an independent obligation to follow the law. I think that's a constructive answer. Let me turn now to the matter of spying on journalists. You wrote in your response to the committee questions that you support the Biden administration Department of Justice's policy restricting the collection of reporters' records, and you called for the codification of those restrictions. Will you reconfirm that position this morning?
I believe strongly in the First Amendment, which protects a free press.
So you will, in effect, say that you will continue to support the Biden administration policy to protect journalists?
I'm not familiar with the specific Biden administration policy, but I believe strongly in the defense of the First Amendment.
It is a policy that restricts the collection of reporters' records, and you have called for the codification of those records. So I'm going to accept that you're not changing your position, and I appreciate it. I got time, I think, for one more question. While you were in Congress, you introduced legislation prohibiting the government from mandating that Americans' phones or apps include mechanisms to allow the government to bypass encryption or other privacy technology. In your written responses to the committee questions, you reconfirmed your opposition to these mandates. Is that still your position?
Yes, these back doors lead down a dangerous path that can undermine Americans' Fourth Amendment rights and civil liberties.
You are being very helpful by moving so quickly. Let me turn to whistleblowers. You wrote in your response that whistleblowers must have clear, protected channels to report concerns, including the unauthorized transmittal of classified information to appropriate entities such as members of Congress. Do you agree that IC whistleblowers must have a clear path to this committee and that they don't need permission from agencies to talk to us? That's a yes or no.
Senator, the answer is clearly yes. I would like to state a few other actions I would take if confirmed as Director of National Intelligence is number one, make sure that we don't have illegal and unconstitutional programs within the intelligence community, making sure that we enact security clearance reform to limit access to our nation's top secrets, make sure that every single person in the workforce understands their rights as whistleblowers and the legal channels to take, which would include coming directly to you as members of Congress, as well as establishing a direct hotline to myself, should they choose to take that path.
One last question, if I might. Would you support the declassification of the committee's full report on the CIA's torture program?
Senator, I believe in transparency. I have not seen this, and so cannot make an honest assessment for that answer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Cornyn.
Welcome, Ms. Gabbard. Congratulations and thank you for your service to our nation. I hope you will take to heart the chairman's comments about the exploding bureaucracy, not only in the government generally, but in the office of the Director of National Intelligence. This is a critical role to be played, but unfortunately that role is not made easier or more effective by such a large, unwieldy bureaucracy. Do you believe that the President of the United States should get all of the lawfully collected intelligence that's available in order to inform his judgments as Commander-in-Chief?
Senator, not only is the answer a strong yes, I would say that it is the Director of National Intelligence responsibility to make sure that the President has access to all the intelligence so that he can make the best informed decisions for our country.
And you will be the one actually briefing him on a daily basis, correct?
That's correct.
And the President's daily brief, and we've heard that that is composed of about 60% of it's composed of information gleaned by collection under Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. I've heard your comments to Senator Wyden and others. You and I talked about the importance of getting dissenting views in front of the president so that we don't have groupthink, which can be very dangerous, particularly in the intelligence collection areas. And I appreciate your agreeing that presenting the policymakers, including the president, with dissenting views is very important. Are you aware that overwhelmingly the courts that have looked at a challenge to Section 702 based on the Fourth Amendment and any potential warrant requirement have overwhelmingly said that the Fourth Amendment is not implicated by search of lawfully collected intelligence?
I'm aware, yes, Senator.
And do you disagree with that?
What I began to say in answer to Senator Wyden's previous question on this issue is, number one, the decision about a warrant requirement will be yours to make, not mine as the Director of National Intelligence.
You'll be the Director of National Intelligence, and people will be wanting to hear from you about what we should do as policymakers. Admittedly, you're not going to be a policymaker, but you certainly will inform us. And wouldn't you do agree that the courts have overwhelmingly held that a warrant is not required, correct?
Yes, Senator, I'm aware of the court rulings. What my commitment is to make sure that we uphold the Fourth Amendment rights of Americans in protecting against unlawful seizure and search. There are many different ways to do this. The devil is in the details. There are examples of how even in situations under Title I where a warrant is required to surveil a U.S. person.
Title I is different. I agree.
Correct.
I agree with you on that.
But my point, Senator, if I may just finish.
Excuse me. If that was misused in the case of Carter Page and basically an FBI lawyer lied in order to secure that warrant.
Which is why there are safe.
What would be necessary to be shown in order to establish probable cause to a judge in order to obtain a warrant?
Again, Senator, that's not for me to say. That would be for you all to decide and for the Attorney General to weigh in on.
Do you know
Thanks.
what the elements of probable cause are and whether that's a practical and workable solution?
This is the center of the debate, the high standard of probable cause that's required to get a warrant, and why this will continue to be a conversation, again, with the Attorney General weighing in and all of you in Congress making this policy decision.
The CIA director, John Ratcliffe, said during his testimony before this committee that he believed that a warrant is not only required by law, but is actually impractical. Do you disagree with that or agree with that?
I will be in a better position to make an assessment on the practical implications of this if confirmed as DNI. My commitment remains to uphold the Constitution and Americans' Fourth Amendment rights.
Where would the warrant be sought? Would it be in the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, or would it be in some other Article III court?
My understanding is that it would be in the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court.
Are you aware of the fact the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court has held that a warrant is not required?
I am aware.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Heinrich.
Thank you, Chairman. Welcome. You traveled to Syria and Lebanon in January 2017. Bassam Kawam personally paid for that trip, and Bassam and his brother Ilyas accompanied you to both Lebanon and Syria. The Kawam brothers have links to the Syrian Social Nationalist Party, an ally of Hezbollah. And in fact, in 2008, the Syrian Social Nationalist Party participated in the assassination of a former Lebanese prime minister and assisted Hezbollah in Beirut. When did you become aware of the links between the Kawam brothers and the Syrian Social Nationalist Party?
Senator, thank you for your question. Just a point of clarification. I paid for my own expenses and travel on that trip. I was not aware of any accusations of these two Lebanese Americans associations until after the trip occurred.
And that's when you reimbursed?
Correct. Correct. Not because of, I wanted to make sure that there were no perceived conflicts of interest. I addressed this specific question to these Lebanese Americans who had organized the trip, and they vehemently denied any associations with that group.
There is not a great deal in the public record about what you and Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad discussed for so long in January of 2017. And I think there's a great deal of interest from the American people about what was discussed in that meeting. So what did you talk about? And did you press Assad on things like his use of chemical weapons, systematic torture, and the killing of so many Syrians?
Yes, Senator. I upon returning from this trip, I met with people like then Leader Nancy Pelosi and Steny Hoyer, talked to them and answered their questions about the trip. And quite frankly, I was surprised that there was no one from the intelligence community or the State Department who reached out or showed any interest whatsoever in my takeaways from that trip. I would have been very happy to have a conversation and give them a back brief. I went with former Congressman Dennis Kucinich, who had been there many times before and who had met with Assad before. A number of topics were covered and discussed. And to directly answer your question, yes, I asked him tough questions about his own regime's actions, the use of chemical weapons and the brutal tactics that were being used against his own people.
Were you able to extract any concessions from President Assad?
No, and I didn't expect to, but I felt these issues were important to address.
According to your revised trip report, your third meeting in Syria after meeting with Assad and then his wife was with Grand Mufti Ahmad Badreddin Hassoun. Forgive me if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. In an October 2011 speech, the Grand Mufti warned the U.S. and Europe that we will prepare suicide bombers who are already in your countries if you bomb Syria or Lebanon. What was the goal, or what did you accomplish by meeting with Grand Mufti?
Senator, before going on the trip and during my time both in Syria and Lebanon, I made it a point to meet with different religious leaders, both Muslim leaders as well as various Christian and Catholic leaders who were there in the region. I did that both in Syria and in Lebanon to hear from them about what their concerns or thoughts were with regard to the war that was being waged at the time.
Were you aware of his threats regarding suicide bombers in the United States?
I was not and had not heard that until today.
Who vetted the people that you met with on this trip to Syria and Lebanon?
The itinerary was created by former Congressman Dennis Kucinich, his constituents who he had traveled with to Syria and Lebanon a number of times before. Some of the individuals that I met with were looked at prior to the trip. Others came up during the trip that were unexpected.
Just in complete hindsight, would you view this trip as good judgment?
Yes, Senator. And I believe that leaders, whether you be in Congress or the President of the United States, can benefit greatly by going and engaging, boots on the ground, learning and listening and meeting directly with people, whether they be adversaries or friends.
Last question. Who do you blame? Who's responsible for the war in Ukraine?
Putin started the war in Ukraine.
Thank you. Sir Moran, before your questions, I want to extend all of our condolences in particular to you for the loss of life for your fellow Kansans last night in that air crash. Our prayers are with all of your people back home who lost loved ones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So many people here and throughout the halls of Congress have been very kind and expressing their condolences, and I appreciate you saying this in this setting just now. Lieutenant Colonel Gabbard, you were asked in your questionnaire about your priorities, and you listed Iran and Hamas and Hezbollah and North Korea. You also mentioned Russia. But the only thing you said about Russia in fully explaining why it's a priority is ending the war with Russia. When you talk about Russia, what are your fears or policy priorities beyond ending the war? How do you see Russia as a threat to the United States?
Senator, if confirmed as the Director of National Intelligence, it will be paramount for me to assess where our intelligence gaps may exist so that I can provide the President and all of you with the most accurate full picture of that threat assessment to directly answer your questions. I think that it is a complex environment. Russia remains a strategic competitor. There are a number of concerns that have to do with their nuclear weapons, as well as how the decisions and policies that are being made by this body and by the President will impact our own national security, which is my foremost concern.
I want to make certain that in no way does Russia get a pass in either your mind or your heart, or in any policy recommendation you would make or not make.
Senator, I'm offended by the question because my sole focus, commitment, and responsibility is about our own nation, our own security, and the interests of the American people. In carrying out the responsibilities of the Director of National Intelligence, if confirmed, no country, group, or individual will get a pass in my fulfilling that responsibility of providing that full intelligence picture so that you all can make the best informed policy decisions for the safety, security, and freedom of the American people. You have my commitment to be completely objective, unbiased, and apolitical, and I hope you understand my commitment to our country's interest.
I absolutely do. You have answered my question in the manner in which I wanted to hear, that you will do this in an objective manner, provide the information necessary, and that Russia, if it's a threat, you will tell us so and tell us the details of that threat.
Yes, Senator.
How would you restructure the national intelligence priority framework to better align with President Trump's national security goals?
Senator, this is a discussion, if confirmed, I look forward to having with the President and his national security advisor, again, based on the threat assessment and based on the President's priorities. He has spoken about a number of different priorities in different parts of the world. I would work with them on that national intelligence priorities framework, which will serve as the foundation for the intelligence elements under ODNI.
Any recommendations that you have in mind to make to President Trump in that regard?
I want to make sure that any recommendations that I make to the president are fully informed. From where I sit now, I don't believe that I can make those recommendations. I take that responsibility seriously and wouldn't want to shortchange him without first doing the due diligence and work to make sure my recommendations are well-founded.
How will you, Lieutenant Colonel, as the DNI, if confirmed, meet the objectivity and political neutrality requirements to ensure that you're telling the White House what they need to hear and not what they want to hear? A follow-up to that is, how will you handle conflicting intelligence reports from the various members of the intelligence community and present a broad intelligence picture to the president?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Senator. I hope that you have confidence in my ability to extract politics from what my role will be as Director of National Intelligence, because it's something I've done for almost 22 years now of wearing the uniform, both serving in the National Guard and the Army Reserve, even while holding political office. There is a brick wall between the two, and I have fulfilled that obligation in uniform, as I will as Director of National Intelligence if confirmed. I think the president, I know the president values hearing a lot of different views, and I would make sure that in the intelligence community's responsibilities, that dissenting views are not only allowed, but encouraged, and where they present themselves, make sure that the president and you as policymakers are aware so that you can make your best informed decision.
Would you agree with me that bias and prejudice, if it exists any place, exists in both sides of an issue, both partisan sides of this place called Washington, D.C., and the goal, the effort that you will make is to make certain that all the information is presented in a nonpartisan, direct, and manner based upon the facts as known?
Yes, Senator, I agree, and you have my commitment. This is essential for the American people and all of you to have faith and trust in the intelligence products that are being delivered.
One of the greatest challenges is knowing who's telling us the truth, and we need a DNI who tells the truth. True?
Yes, I have a long record of speaking truth to power and would continue that commitment if confirmed in this role.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Moran. Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Ms. Gabbard, I certainly want to applaud and express my appreciation for your service, both in the military and in the Congress. Two very challenging jobs, and I want to thank you for that. I noted that Edward Snowden was in Hawaii, of all places, for a year and a half before he fled to Hong Kong and then on to Russia. Did you ever meet him or have any contact with him during that period, or subsequently with telephone calls, emails, Zooms, contact with he or his lawyers?
Yeah.
No, Senator, not at any time have I had contact with Edward Snowden.
And you introduced a bill in 2020 that was essentially a pardon. It basically said all charges should be dropped. You had a lot of whereases in that bill. Where did the factual basis for those whereas clauses come from?
Senator, if I recall, in that bill, it came from publicly available information.
I see. And were you aware that there was a bipartisan committee report from the House Intelligence Committee in 2016 on Snowden's activities?
I don't recall specifically at that time, but I am aware of that committee's report and executive summary that was reported publicly. I did not have access to the classified report that summary was based on.
Did you read that report prior to filing your bill in 2020?
Senator, I don't recall specifically. I remember reading a lot of materials prior to filing that bill.
Well, the bipartisan committee report, the first item, Edward Snowden perpetrated the largest and most damaging public release of classified information in U.S. intelligence history. Goes on to say Snowden caused tremendous damage to national security, and the vast majority of the documents he stole have nothing to do with programs impacting individual privacy. But you don't recall ever seeing the work of that committee?
I'm aware of those conclusions drawn.
You're aware
Edward
now.
Snowden.
Were you aware at the time?
Yes, I was, Senator.
And-
Edward Snowden broke the law. There's no question about that. He should not have released all of that information that caused that harm.
How
There's
many
no question about that.
How many documents did he release?
I know that he took over 1 million documents. I don't know specifically how many of those million he specifically released.
Well, you stated very unequivocally today, Snowden broke the law, but you introduced a bill in Congress along with Congressman Matt Gaetz to essentially pardon him. So he broke the law, but it wasn't all that serious. Is that what you thought in 2020?
I take very seriously upholding our Constitution and have sworn an oath to support and defend that Constitution over 8 times in my life. My statements in the past have been reflective of the egregious and illegal programs that were exposed in that leak.
But you ignore the vast majority, as the committee found, bipartisan. I think Devin Nunes was the chair, Adam Schiff was the vice chair. The conclusion was that the vast majority of these things that he released had nothing to do with constitutional rights, the Fourth Amendment, but indeed were enormous compromises of our national security. You
Senator, I focused on raising concerns around egregious, illegal, and unconstitutional programs that our government was conducting that clearly violated Americans' Fourth Amendment rights. I think the most important thing that I hope all of you find to be relevant here is that if confirmed as Director of National Intelligence, I would take seriously the responsibility to protect our nation's secrets, just as I have for almost 20 years of holding a security clearance of some sort myself, either secret or top secret, and have never once violated the responsibility and privilege that comes with holding that clearance, and have a specific action plan in place to make sure that there is not another Snowden-type leak in the future.
I think you testified that you never saw the classified version of this report.
That's correct.
On page 22 of the report, there's a heading that's not classified that says, what damage did Snowden cause? And then there's a lot of redacted material. Did that not raise a red flag for you? Or do you not recall
Edward
seeing
Snowden broke the law. Like I said, I did not have access to that classified.
Did you seek access to it?
I believe so, yes. This was quite some time ago.
But you still introduced your bill to essentially.
I take very seriously the protection of American civil liberties and our Fourth Amendment rights. If confirmed as Director of National Intelligence, I'd make sure that there is no further Snowden-type leak in the future, and that those who have concerns have legal channels to raise those concerns so that we don't violate and release our nation's secrets.
There are about 20 countries in the world that don't.
Time has expired. Senator Langford.
It's a very.
Tulsi, it's good to see you again. Thanks for the time.
Thank you.
That we got a chance to be able to spend together and be able to talk through a lot of these issues. Thanks for your service to the country, both in Congress, though you were in the wrong party at the time, and your service to the country through your service there, including in my great state in Oklahoma, that you had the opportunity to be able to serve there. I want to give an opportunity for you to be able to answer a few things on it, and I want to set some context. There's been a lot of questions about 702 and about Edward Snowden, and it may seem like this is repetitive to be able to come through it, but there are thousands of intelligence employees and folks that they have also taken an oath to the country and to the Constitution. They serve our country every day. They're the folks that don't have a uniform on, that no one ever says thank you to them, and no one ever buys them lunch because people don't know who they are. But they every day put their lives on the line, and they work very hard to be able to protect Americans. And when Edward Snowden got mad at his employer that he didn't get the promotion that he wanted and started harvesting information, and then found some things that he didn't like on it, and then kept going, and then released them to media and went to China, and then went from China to Russia and became a Russian citizen and continued to be able to layer out intelligence unrelated to the civil liberties of any American, and then said, I have more and I can release them at any time I want. They don't see him as brave. They see him as a traitor. And the concern among so many here, and I think what a lot of the folks in the intelligence community that you'd have the responsibility to oversight is, they want to hear that you also believe the same thing, that not just he broke the law, but that he's a traitor because they don't want that to ever happen again. And all the sources that they had, that they trusted and that trusted them, now their lives were at risk. And all the programs that they had that were determined lawful all collapsed, and that intelligence then was gone, and the president didn't have access to a lot of information for decision making. So this is a big deal to everybody here, because it's a big deal to everybody that you'll also oversee in that role as well. And so it's helpful for them to be able to hear your heart on this. So was Edward Snowden a traitor?
Senator, my heart is with my commitment to our Constitution and our nation's security.
Ours too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have shown throughout my almost 22 years of service in the military, as well as my time in Congress, how seriously I take the privilege of having access to classified information and our nation's secrets. And that's why I'm committed, if confirmed as Director of National Intelligence, to join you in making sure that there is no future Snowden-type leak. And I would do so by taking 4 specific actions. Number 1, again, to make sure that there are no illegal and unconstitutional programs. Limiting in a big way those who have access to our nation's top secrets through security clearance reform, making sure that every single person in the workforce knows about the legal whistleblower channels available to them, and making sure that there's a direct line available to me should anyone have concerns. If people choose to step outside of those legal channels to raise any concerns about programs or actions that exist within the intelligence community that are classified, there will be no excuse to do so, and they should be charged and prosecuted under the law.
Was he a traitor this time when he took America's secrets, released them in public, and then ran to China and became a Russian citizen?
Senator, I'm focused on the future and how we can prevent something like this from happening again.
So you would have the responsibility to be able to give counsel to the president, which is a great privilege. You already have his ear, quite frankly, and y'all have a great relationship on that, which is very beneficial. But when President Trump chose to take the strike on Soleimani, he was also at that same time going through an impeachment in the House. And you were kind of tough on him at the time about that. You called it a declaration of war. You said that the Soleimani strike will lead to an outcome that will further undermine our national security. As a member of Congress, I also take seriously declaration of war and our responsibility in that. He was acting in a way that he came out and the intelligence gave that Soleimani was in the process of preparing a strike on American citizens and those folks that were in the field at the time. I guess the question that I have is, the ODNI will sit with the president, will provide options to the president and say, here are the options that you could take. Would you have presented a Soleimani strike at that time, looking back at it now in retrospect and saying this is an option you could take and here's how to be able to do it?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. It's an important question. If confirmed as Director of National Intelligence, I would make sure that the president has all of the objective analysis and intelligence reporting so that he can make that best informed decision, including all of the options and actions that he has available to him, which should exist alongside an assessment of what the possible repercussions or responses to those actions may be. My own personal views have no place in that assessment and that providing to the president and his advisors with all of those options available.
Thank you, Senator Langford. Senator Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to repeat my colleague's question to you. Thank you for being here to answer these questions and for your service. Was Edward Snowden a traitor to the United States of America?
Senator, I will also repeat my answer. He broke the law.
You said earlier that you were offended by a question that my colleague from Kansas asked, which I think was his duty as somebody on this committee to fulfill his responsibility to advise and consent. We are not here to be a rubber stamp for the President of the United States. Let me ask you again, do you believe, as the chairman of this committee believes, as the vast majority of members of our intelligence agencies, that Edward Snowden was a traitor to the United States of America?
Senator, if confirmed as Director of National Intelligence, I will work with you to make sure that there is not another Snowden-like leak.
Media. It's not a moment to propagate theories, conspiracy theories, or or attacks on journalism in the United States. This is when you need to answer the questions of the people whose votes you're asking for to be confirmed as the chief intelligence officer of this nation. As my colleague said, this is not about you. It's about the people that serve the intelligence agencies of the United States. Is Edward Snowden a traitor to the United States of America? That is not a hard question to answer when the stakes are this high.
Senator, as someone who has
your
served
answer,
in
yes
uniform,
or no, is Edward Snowden a traitor to the United States of America?
as someone who has
I'll go on
worn
to
our
my
uniform
questions.
in combat, I understand how critical our national security
Apparently
is.
you don't. Apparently you don't. Let me ask you, I've worked very hard to put your own words here in front of the committee. Not, fake news, not conspiracy theories on the internet, but the actual things that you have said. On February 23rd, 2022, at the very moment that Russian tanks were rolling across the peaceful border of Ukraine for the first time, you tweeted at 11:30 p.m. your time, "This war and suffering could have easily been avoided if Biden administration / NATO had simply acknowledged Russia's legitimate security concerns regarding Ukraine's becoming a member of NATO." Did you say that, yes or no?
I believe you're reading my tweet, Senator.
Yes is the answer. A few months later, you said on your podcast, and I quoted it, quote, "But this regime change war against Russia that the U.S. and NATO are waging via their proxy in Ukraine didn't begin when Putin invaded Ukraine. They had their eyes set on this objective long before that." Did you say that, yes or no?
I believe you're reading my tweet.
Thank
There's
you.
a lot
The answer
more.
is yes.
You're quoting a podcast that
I'm
provided
happy
much
to have
more
a conversation
context.
with the chairman about whether I'm taking anything out of context. I don't think I am. And your answer is yes. Are you aware that your comments about proxy wars and Russia's legitimate security concerns, to quote your own words, are in alignment with what the Russians have said to justify their invasion of Ukraine? Yes or
Senator,
no?
I don't pay attention to Russian
So I'll
propaganda.
take
My
that as
goal is to
I'll
speak
take
the
that as
truth,
the answer is no.
regardless of whether
Thank
you like it or not.
I'll take it. That's fine. You said you are used to speaking truth to power.
Yes.
I'm shocked to hear you now say that, you are agreeing. I'm not shocked because I know you said it. You are agreeing that you basically said that Putin was justified in rolling over the peaceful border of Ukraine, the first time since World War II that a free nation had been invaded by a totalitarian state. And you were there at 11:30 p.m. that night to say that you were with them, not us. And let me tell you something. You say you don't know because you don't read Russian propaganda. Russian state TV then aired your comments. Did you know that?
Senator, I think you should also quote the statement that I made criticizing Putin for his invasion
What
of
I
Ukraine.
would say, Mr. Chairman, with the last, it's up to all of us. We're the Senate. We get to decide whether we're going to confirm this nominee. Obviously, we didn't select this nominee. But can't we do better than somebody who doesn't believe in 702? Can't we believe that somebody who can't answer whether Snowden was a traitor 5 times today, who made excuses for Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine, the first time that I'm aware of any American official has done that? I'm questioning her judgment. That's the issue that's at stake here. And as you said, and I totally agree, this is about our intelligence officers. And you cannot answer. Most of what we do here is in secret. This is one of the very few opportunities that you will ever have to have a conversation with this panel in public. And the record is going to be very clear about the position you took with regard to Edward Snowden, and the record is going to be very clear about your reaffirmation of the statements you made in the middle of the night when Russia was invading the free country of Ukraine. And
Senator
I hope
Bennett,
we will
your
take
time-
that in
your time has expired.
consideration when
Senator
we
Bennett.
have this vote.
Your time has expired. I will note that during Senator Bennett's question and answer, there was 2 disturbances in the room. The first sounded like a cell phone. I would ask everyone on both sides of the dais, if you have not silenced or turned off your cell phone, please do so now. The second disturbance was the cries of a small child. We will welcome such disturbances because the cries of an infant are the sound of answered prayers. Senator Rounds.
Not only here, but the answered prayers in church when they cry as well, Mr. Chairman. First of all, thank you for your service to our country. I think part of the discussion here, as you can see, we feel very, very strongly about FISA 702. We work with it literally every day. As you can also tell, we have some very, very strong feelings here with regard to the actions of Edward Snowden.
Oh my God.
I want to come back and I'm going to give you an opportunity to make any corrections or to make any other comments with regard to both of those issues that have been brought up here. But before I get into that, I want to go back into a little bit of your previous history as well. You did serve as you served as a congressperson for what, 8 years?
Yes, Senator.
And during that time, you served on the Armed Services Committee. And during that time period, you did carry a TS-SCI clearance. You worked your way through that time period. You had an opportunity to look at a lot of information. Can you share just a little bit about the way that you've looked at that, not just as a member of the congressional delegation from Hawaii, but also during the time in which you were a lieutenant colonel serving up through and including a battalion commander? Talk about that a little bit, please.
Thank you, Senator, for your question. In both of those roles, I had exposure to different sides of how critical our national security is and the unique role that our intelligence community plays in ensuring our national security. My most recent deployment with the military was as part of a joint special operations task force to Djibouti and Somalia, where our mission was to support the Somalis government and military's focus on defeating al-Shabaab, which is al-Qaeda's element there within East Africa. One of the things that we came across there that I hadn't known previously, even having served in Congress for 8 years because it hadn't been focused on, was how al-Shabaab specifically was the biggest funder of al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, which again should be of unique concern and interest to our own national security concerns. Being able to engage with world leaders in both capacities, in uniform and as a member of Congress, being a customer of intelligence in both of those roles gives me a unique perspective, if confirmed as Director of National Intelligence, to come in with fresh eyes, to come in with some of the frustrations that I experienced as a member of Congress.
I'm going to pause this for a second. Donald Trump just spoke out, just had a press briefing regarding the crash. So I'm going to go to him.
They've taken too long. We're struggling to get very good people that everybody knows are going to be confirmed, but we're struggling to get them out faster. We want them out faster. It's a good question, actually. We've been pushing Sean. Everyone knows Sean for a long time. He got many, many Democrat votes, but they want to take as long as they can. They ask questions like some of the questions that Peter would ask. that were totally irrelevant and not very good questions, but they want to just keep it going. They want to keep it going as long as possible. I was very honored, actually, that you got so many Democrat votes. That was really good. That was really good.
When I try to meet with the families, and second question, is it your impression that military training that was done during that time?
The what?
The training that the helicopter was involved in. Is it anything you can tell us about
You
that?
don't know. These are the things that will come up with the investigation. You don't know, but the helicopter obviously was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and a tragedy occurred. Please.
I've got a question about the.
No, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. You've been critical of the current regulations and you've called for big reforms at FAA. I'm curious, sir,
I made the reforms, actually.
What is your message?
3 days ago, I made them.
Yes, sir. What is your message then to the American public in the weeks and months ahead? Should they feel hesitant to fly? And if you could clarify perhaps something that the Defense Secretary said when he said that this helicopter was on a continuity of government mission?
I don't know what that refers to, but they were practicing. They do that. They call it practicing, and they were.
They call it practicing.
And that's something that should be done. It's only continuity in the sense that we want to have very good people, and that has to be in continuity, and that's what they refer to. But it was basically practice, and it was a practice that worked out very, very badly. Okay.
On his question, the first question, should people be hesitant to fly right now?
No, not at all. I've not hesitated to fly. This is something that it's been many years that something like this has happened, and the collision is just something that we don't expect ever to happen again. We are going to have the highest level people. We've already hired some of the people that you've already hired for that position long before we knew about this. I mean, long before. From the time I came in, we started going out and getting the best people because I said it's not appropriate what they're doing. I think it's a tremendous mistake. You know, they like to do things and they like to take them too far, and this is sometimes what ends up happening. Now, with that, I'm not blaming the controller. I'm saying there are things that you could question, like the height of the helicopter, the height of the plane being at the same level and going in opposite directions. It's not a positive. But no, we're already hiring people. No, flying is very safe. We have the safest flying anywhere in the world, and we'll keep it that way. Thank you all very much. Thank you very much, everybody.
It's so hard sometimes. Seriously. Everyone's getting ready to go live. So, according to them, it's that Trump's DEI for weakening FAA in the aftermath of the Roma. Diversity initiatives at the FAA for weakening safety following a deadly midair collision near Ronald Reagan National Airport. Trump spoke to the press from the White House briefing room about the incident, which he called of terrible proportions, but his solemn tone quickly lambasting the Biden and Obama administration's aiming initiatives. Brilliant people have to be in those positions, Trump said. He cited efforts by the FAA to hire individuals with disabilities, including dwarfism, missing limbs, and intellectual. Oh no, we need to find those people. Like another. Am I in the Twilight Zone? This guy is just like, are you serious with this? Oh, we need to find those people. We need to find this in quick. Oops. We are looking for this right now. The Trump, oh gosh. Oh my gosh, that's so sad. So the cause of the collision, there's no immediate word. Officials said that flight conditions were clear as the jet coming from Kansas was making a routine landing when the helicopter flew in its path. What's known about the victims? Passengers on this flight include a group of figure skaters, their coaches, and family members who were returning from a development camp that followed the U.S. Figure Skating Championships in Wichita. What's the latest on the recovery? The body of the plane was found upside down in 3 sections in waist-deep water. The wreckage of the helicopter was also found, and some 300 first responders were on the scene as of early Thursday morning. Oh, gosh. All right, I want to see his speech. We're taking a little left turn to hear from Trump on the crash.
Thank you very much.
This is not live. This just happened about 41 minutes ago.
I speak to you this morning in an hour of anguish for our nation. Just before 9 p.m. last night, a regional jet carrying 60 passengers and 4 crew collided with an Army Black Hawk helicopter carrying 3 military service members over the Potomac River in Washington, D.C., while on final approach to Reagan National Airport. Both aircraft crashed instantly and were immediately submerged into the icy waters of the Potomac. Real tragedy. The massive search and rescue mission was underway throughout the night, leveraging every asset at our disposal. And I have to say, the local, state, federal, military, including the United States Coast Guard in particular, they've done a phenomenal job. So quick, so fast. It was mobilized immediately. The work has now shifted to a recovery mission. Sadly, there are no survivors. This was a dark and excruciating night in our nation's capital and in our nation's history, and a tragedy of terrible proportions. As one nation, we grieve for every precious soul that has been taken from us so suddenly. And we are a country of really, we are in mourning. This is really shaken a lot of people, including people very sadly from other nations who were on the flight. For the family members back in Wichita, Kansas, here in Washington, D.C., and throughout the United States and in Russia, we have a Russia contingent of very talented people. Unfortunately, we're on that plane. Very, very, very sorry about that. Whose loved ones were aboard the passenger jet. We can only begin to imagine the agony that you're all feeling. Nothing worse. On behalf of the First Lady, myself, and 340 million Americans, our hearts are shattered alongside yours, and our prayers are with you now and in the days to come. We'll be working very, very difficult. Water. We're all overcome with the grief for many who have so tragically perished, will no longer be with us. Together we take solace in the knowledge that their journey ended not in the cold waters of the Potomac, but Sean Duffy, his second day on the job when that happened. It's a rough one. We'll be working tirelessly. He's a great gentleman. The whole group these are great people. The Obama standards from an acting commissioner to the FAA, Christopher Rocheleau, a 22-year veteran of the agency, highly respected.
This is
Christopher, thank you very much.
Donald
Appreciate
Trump's
it.
press conference.
We must have only the highest standards for those who work in our aviation system. I changed the Obama standards from very mediocre at best to extraordinary. You remember that. Only the highest aptitude, they have to be the highest intellect and psychologically superior people were allowed to qualify for air traffic controllers. That was not so prior to getting there. When I arrived in 2016, I made that change very early on because I always felt this was a job that, and other jobs too, but this was a job that had to be superior intelligence. And
Gosh.
we didn't really have that, and we had it.
Okay.
And then when I left office and Biden took over, he changed them back to lower than ever before. I put safety first. Obama, Biden, and the Democrats put policy first. And they put politics at a level that nobody's ever seen, because this was the lowest level. Their policy was horrible, and their politics was even worse. So as you know, last week, long before the crash, I signed an executive order restoring our highest standards for air traffic controllers and other important jobs throughout the country. So it was very interesting. About a week ago, almost upon entering office, I signed something last week that was an executive order, very powerful, on restoring the highest standards of air traffic controllers and others, by the way. Then my administration will set the highest possible bar for aviation safety. We have to have our smartest people. It doesn't matter what they look like, how they speak, who they are. It matters intellect, talent, the word talent. They have to be talented, naturally talented geniuses. You can't have regular people doing that job. They won't be able to do it.
Is this guy?
But we'll restore faith in American air travel. I'll have more to say about that. I do want to point out that various articles that appeared prior to my entering office, and here's one. The FAA's diversity push includes focus on hiring people with severe intellectual and psychiatric disabilities.
What?
That is amazing. And then it says FAA says people with severe disabilities are most underrepresented segment of the workforce, and they want them in, and they want them, they can be air traffic controllers. I don't think so. This was in January 14th, so that was a week before I entered office. They put a big push to put diversity into the FAA's program.
Wait.
And others, by the way. Then my administration will set the highest possible bar for aviation safety. We have to have our smartest people. It doesn't matter what they look like, how they speak, who they are. It matters intellect, talent, the word talent. They have to be talented, naturally talented geniuses. You can't have regular people doing that job. They won't be able to do it. but will restore faith in American air travel. I'll have more to say about that. I do want to point out that various articles that appeared prior to my entering office, and here's one. The FAA's diversity push includes focus on hiring people with severe intellectual and psychiatric disabilities.
Severe intellectual.
That is amazing. And then it says FAA says people with severe disabilities are most underrepresented segment of the workforce, and they want them in, and they want them, they can be air traffic controllers. I don't think so. This was
So he's accusing the Biden administration of doing a hiring push for hiring severe intellectual candidates and severely disabled candidates for air traffic controller positions. What? This is a joke, right? Oh my God.
on January 14th. So that was a week before I entered office. They put a big push to put diversity into the FAA's program. Then another article, the Federal Aviation Administration, this was before I got to office recently, second term. The FAA is actively recruiting workers who suffer severe intellectual disabilities, psychiatric problems, and other mental and physical conditions under a diversity and inclusion hiring initiative spelled out on the agency's website. Can you imagine? These are people
on the agency's website
that are, I mean, actually, their lives are shortened because of the stress that they have. Brilliant people have to be in those positions, and their lives are actually shortened, very substantially shortened because of the stress, where you have many, many planes coming into one target.
That's true.
And you need a very special talent. And
I actually did HR for a that was contracted by the FAA. And we, in fact, did have a contract with this airport. We provided security for them. And just off of my experience, they have, and this was 5.5 years ago, significant like qualifications and requirements that FAA controllers have to undergo just to qualify. So the fact that he's saying that the FAA had a serious hiring push to hire candidates with severe intellectual disabilities and psychiatric issues, there's just no way. This guy, are you kidding me?
a very special genius to be able to do it.
A very special genius.
Targeted disabilities are those disabilities that the federal government, as a matter of policy, has identified for special emphasis in recruitment and hiring. The FAA's website states they include hearing, vision, missing extremities, partial paralysis, complete paralysis, epilepsy, severe intellectual.
What? What?
That are, I mean, actually, their lives are shortened because of the stress.
I have to hear this again. There is no
brilliant people
way
have to be in those positions, and their lives are actually shortened, very substantially shortened because of the stress, where you have many, many planes coming into one target.
I can't. Donald Trump is saying
you need a very special talent and a very special genius to be able to do it.
A very special genius to.
Targeted disabilities are those disabilities that the federal government, as a matter of policy, has identified for special emphasis in recruitment and hiring. The FAA's website states they include hearing, vision, missing extremities.
He's saying that on the FAA's website, we'll check later, the FAA was hiring candidates with vision, missing extremities. I'm like, I am, what? This cannot be. I don't believe anything he says.
Partial paralysis, complete paralysis.
Partial paralysis. So the FAA wants to hire people with missing extremities, partial paralysis, people with vision loss,
Epilepsy, severe
epilepsy. This is who the FAA is hiring. This is what Donald Trump is saying.
intellectual disability, psychiatric disability, and dwarfism all qualify for the position of a controller of airplanes pouring into our country, pouring into
All of these candidates that have these things qualify them to be an FAA controller. This is what our president is saying. One of the highest stressful jobs that a person can have as an FAA controller that undergo years of training are hiring candidates with missing limbs, missing extremities, vision loss, psychiatric issues, intellectual disabilities. This is, and people believe this. I'm going to confirm this, but are you kidding me? This cannot be.
to a little spot, a little dot on the map, a little runway. The initiative is part of the FAA's diversity and inclusion hiring plan. Think of that. The initiative is part of the FAA's diversity and inclusion hiring plan, which says diversity is integral to achieving FAA's mission of ensuring safe and efficient travel. I don't think so. I think it's just the opposite. The FAA website shows that the agency's guidance on diversity hiring were last updated on March 23rd of 22. They wanted to make it even more so. And then I came in, and I assume maybe this is the reason. The FAA, which is overseen by Secretary Pete Buttigieg, a real winner. That guy's a real winner. Do you know how badly everything's run since he's run this Department of Transportation? He's a disaster. He was a disaster as a mayor. He ran his city into the ground, and he's a disaster now. He's just got a good line of bullshit.
What?
The Department of Transportation.
Did he just say that on
agency
air?
charged with regulating civil aviation. Well, he
conference?
runs it, 45,000 people, and he's run it right into the ground with his diversity. So I had to say that it's terrible. Then it's a group within the FAA, another story, determined that the workforce was too white, that they had concerted efforts to get the administration to change that and to change it immediately. This was in the Obama administration just prior to my getting there. And we took care of African Americans, Hispanic Americans. We took care of everybody at levels that nobody's ever seen before. It's one of the reasons I won. But they actually came out with a directive, too white. And
The directive
we want
was at the FAA
people
was
that are competent.
too white.
But now we mourn and we pray and would like to ask all Americans to join me in a moment of silence as we ask God to watch over those who have lost their lives and bring comfort to the loved ones. And I just want to say God bless everyone in this room. This has been a terrible, very short period of time. We'll get to the bottom of it. So we all saw the same thing. We've seen it many times. I've had the honor of hearing tapes. Tapes are scary, very scary tapes. You had a airliner coming in, American Airlines. He was doing everything right. He was on track. He was the same track as everybody else. They came in. It's probably the same track as they've had for 25 years or more. He's coming in the path. And for some reason, he had a helicopter that was at the same height, obviously when they hit, but pretty much the same height, and going at an angle that was unbelievably bad. When the air traffic controller said, do you see, he was talking about, do you see him? But there was very little time left when that was stated. And then also he said, follow him in. And then almost immediately after that, seconds after that, there was the crash that took place. Well, you follow him in, that means like everything's fine. Follow him in. You had a pilot problem from the standpoint of the helicopter. I mean, because it was visual. It was a very clear night. It was cold, but clear, and clear as you could be. The American Airlines plane had lights blazing. They had all of their landing lights on. I could see it from the Kennedy Center tape. We had a tape up on the Kennedy Center. That seems to be the primary. Thus far, I'm sure we'll see other tapes because it's such an area where there are a lot of cameras looking up into the air, into space. So we'll probably see many other shots of it before too much time goes by. But we had a situation where you had a helicopter that had the ability to stop. I have helicopters. You can stop a helicopter very quickly. It had the ability to go up or down. It had the ability to turn. And the turn it made was not the correct turn, obviously. It did somewhat the opposite of what it was told. We don't know that would have been the difference because the timing was so tight. It was so little. There was so little time to think. But what you did have is you had vision. The helicopter had vision of the plane because you had vision of it all the way, perfect vision of it all the way from at Kennedy Center where the tape was taken.
They're hiring blind.
And for some reason, there weren't adjustments made. Again, you could have slowed down the helicopter substantially. You could have stopped the helicopter. You could have gone up. You could have gone down. You could have gone straight up, straight down. You could have turned. You could have done a million different maneuvers. For some reason, it just kept going and then made a slight turn at the very end. And by that time, it was too late. They shouldn't have been at the same height because if it wasn't the same height, you could have gone under it or over it. And
there's sometimes when
nobody realized, or they didn't say that it's at the same height.
Have one of
at the
those
same height, it still wouldn't have been great, but you would have missed it by quite a bit. It could have been 1,000 feet higher. It could have been 200 feet lower. But it was exactly at the same height, and somebody should have been able to point that out.
It goes.
So all of this is going to be studied, but it just seems to me, from a couple of words that I like to use, the words common sense, some really bad things happened. Things happened that shouldn't have happened. So you had a helicopter going in identical direction. You had a helicopter that was at the exact same height as somebody going in essentially the opposite direction.
Yes,
you had a plane that was following a track, which is a track that every other plane followed.
I can't.
And I don't imagine, I know I've heard today that they might have been following the preceding plane, which was pretty close, but not that close, the preceding plane. But you wouldn't have even been able to see that because of the direction that the helicopter was coming in at. So you had a confluence of bad decisions that were made. And you have people that lost their lives, violently lost their lives. We're going to take a few questions. I'd like to ask our new Secretary of Transportation to say a few words. Sean Duffy, great gentleman, just started. It's not your fault, and I know you agree with me very strongly on intellect and even psychological well-being of the air traffic control. It's such an important position, and I think I can't emphasize stronger. I changed it when I first ran in 2016. I changed it. We had the highest standard that you could have, and then they changed it back. That was Biden. To a standard I read it to you. That was from one of your papers. One of the people in this room actually wrote that. And then I changed it back a few days ago. And unfortunately, that was, we'll see. We don't know that necessarily it's even the controller's fault. But one thing we do know, there was a lot of vision and people should have been able to see that, at what point do you stop? At what point do you say, well,
how would they be able to see if they're blind?
So this is a tragedy that should not have happened. Please.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I would just note the President's leadership has been remarkable during this crisis. We've had a whole of government response, local, state, federal. And when you see that kind of cooperation, it begins with the leadership in this body. So thank you for that, Mr. President. You make our jobs a lot easier. You made an important point. When we deal
the
with safety,
MTV
we
Real
can only
World
accept the best and the brightest
alumni.
in positions of safety that impact the lives of our loved ones, our family members. And I think you make a really important point on that, Mr. President. That is the motto of your presidency: the best and the brightest, the most intelligent coming into these spaces. I want to take a moment and extend my condolences to the families of the loved ones. We commit to them that we are going to get to the bottom of this investigation, not in 3 years, not in 4 years, but as quickly as possible with the NTSB, who is here today, as well as the FAA. What happened yesterday shouldn't have happened. It should not have happened. And when Americans take off in airplanes, they should expect to land at their destination. That didn't happen yesterday. That's not acceptable. And so we will not accept excuses. We will not accept passing the buck. We are going to take responsibility at the Department of Transportation and the FAA to make sure we have the reforms that have been dictated by President Trump in place to make sure that these mistakes do not happen again. And again, I want to thank you for your leadership, Mr. President. And I appreciate the confidence you placed in me. Thank you.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Again, I want to echo what the Transportation Secretary said about your leadership. From the moment we found out about this, we were in contact with the White House trying to determine exactly what happened. I would echo it as well. No excuses. We're going to get to the bottom of this. We first and foremost, from the Defense Department, want to pass our condolences to the 64 souls and their families that were affected by this. Never should happen. And certainly the 3 service members, the 3 soldiers, and the CW2 Chief Warrant Officer, on a routine annual retraining of night flights on a standard corridor for a continuity of government mission. The military does dangerous things. It does routine things. Tragically, last night, a mistake was made. I think the president is right. There was some sort of an elevation issue that we have immediately begun investigating at the DoD and Army level. Army CID is on the ground investigating. Top tier aviation assets inside the DoD are investigating, sir, to get to the bottom of it so that it does not happen again, because it's absolutely unacceptable. But I want to echo what the Transportation Secretary and you, Mr. President, said, because it pertains to the DoD as well. We will have the best and brightest in every position possible. As you said in your inaugural, it is colorblind and merit-based. The best leaders possible, whether it's flying Black Hawks and flying airplanes, leading platoons, or in government. The era of DEI is gone at the Defense Department, and we need the best and brightest, whether it's in our air traffic control, or whether it's in our generals, or whether it's throughout government. So thank you for your leadership and courage on that, sir, and we'll stand by you on it. Thank you.
JD, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. President, for your leadership. I just want to reemphasize something the President said, and you've heard from the Secretary of Transportation and of Defense. There really was a whole of government response. We were all on the phone. We were all communicating yesterday, trying to get to the bottom of this immediately, but also try to communicate with the American people about what happened. Something the President said that I think bears reemphasizing, which is that when you don't have the best standards in who you're hiring, it means on the one hand, you're not getting the best people in government, but on the other hand, it puts stresses on the people who are already there. And I think that is a core part of what President Trump is going to bring and has already brought to Washington, D.C. is we want to hire the best people because we want the best people at air traffic control, and we want to make sure we have enough people at air traffic control who are actually competent to do the job. If you go back to just some of the headlines over the past 10 years, you have many hundreds of people suing the government because they would like to be air traffic controllers, but they were turned away because of the color of their skin. That policy ends under Donald Trump's leadership because safety is the first priority of our aviation industry. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, on DEI and the claims that you've made, are you saying this crash was somehow caused and the result of diversity hiring? And what evidence have you seen to support these claims?
It just could have been. We have a high standard. We've had a much higher standard than anybody else. And there are things where you have to go by brain power. You have to go by psychological quality. And psychological quality is a very important element of it. These are various very powerful tests that we put to use, and they were terminated by Biden. And Biden went by a standard that's the exact opposite. So we don't know, but we do know that you had 2 planes at the same level, a helicopter and a plane. It should have happened.
Plane crash.
And we'll see. We're going to look into that. And we're going to see. But
last night,
certainly for an air traffic controller, we want the brightest, the smartest, the sharpest. We want somebody that's psychologically superior.
Biden
and that's what we're going to have.
And the FAA initiatives of hiring severely
to facilitate the transfer of their remains,
yes,
considering
we
the
will.
fact there is no direct air travel between the two countries.
We've already been in contact with Russia, and the answer is yes, we will facilitate. Please go ahead.
That they were hiring people
The
that
situation in the Democratic Republic of the Congo is getting worse. Even though President John Lorenzo has been mediating the conflict between Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of the Congo, he wants to bring peace and stability. The situation is really bad right now. I want to hear from this president if you have any plan in the future to bring peace in the Democratic Republic of the
Congo.
Congo.
And it is a very serious problem. I agree, but I don't think it's appropriate right now to talk about it. But it is a very serious problem.
You don't even yet know the names of the 67 people who were killed, and you are blaming Democrats and DEI policies and air traffic control, and seemingly the member of the U.S. military who was flying that Black Hawk helicopter. Don't you think you're getting ahead of the investigation right now?
No, I don't think so at all. I don't think with the names of the people. You mean the names of the people that are on the plane? You think that's going to make a difference? They are a group of people that have lost their lives. If you want a list of the names, we can give you that. We'll be giving that very soon in coordination with American Airlines. We're in coordination very strongly, obviously, with the military. But I think that's not a very smart question. I'm surprised coming from you. Please.
Based on your analysis so far, do you have a sense of who is at fault? If it was the plane, the helicopter, air traffic control, and can you assure people that it is safe to fly in and out of DC?
Well, I've given you the analysis, and the analysis was based on vision. You had a lot of people that saw what was happening. You had some people that knew what was happening. There was some warnings, but the warnings were given very, very late. Those warnings were given very late. It was almost as they were given. A few seconds later, there was a crash. It should have been brought up earlier. But the people in the helicopter should have seen where they were going. I can't imagine people with 20/20 vision not seeing, what's happening up there. Again, they shouldn't have been at the same height. You're going in reverse directions or sideways directions. Obviously, you want to be at different heights. I see it all the time when I'm flying. You have planes going in the opposite. They're always lower. We're higher. So if somehow there's a screw up, there's not going to be a tragedy. It'll be close, but there's never going to be a tragedy if you're at a different elevation. For whatever reason, they were at the same elevation. And also, from the American Airlines Center, he's along the track that every plane is along. You say, what was the helicopter doing in that track? Very sad. But visually, somebody should have been able to see and taken that helicopter out of play, and they should have been at a different height.
Thank you, sir. You mentioned the Russians that were on board that plane. What other nationalities were on board that passenger?
There were a couple of others. We're going to be announcing it in about an hour. We have some very specific information. We're calling the countries. We've spoken to most of them, but there were some other countries represented. I have not, no. Not about this.
On your executive order, you've already issued an executive order. You say, well, restore aviation safety.
Right.
This crash happened after that. Was the executive order successful? And what more needs to change to keep people safe?
Well, we issued it 3 days ago, and we're in the process of making those changes. This is something that should have been done a long time ago. Actually, my original order should have never been changed, and I think maybe you wouldn't have had this problem. Maybe. Yeah, please, go ahead.
Thank you. We see everyday life that very often those diversity hires cause sometimes issues, as you just mentioned. So what plan do you have? Are we going to see some fire? Are you going to fire some of those diversity hires in the federal government? What's plan do you have?
I would say the answer is yes. If we find that people aren't mentally competent, you see the language. The language is put out by them. And if you see that, I'm not going to bore you by reading it again, but these are not people that should be doing this particular job. They'd be very good for certain jobs, but not people that should be doing this particular job.
Mr. President, you have today blamed the diversity element, but then told us that you weren't sure that the controllers made any mistake. You then said perhaps the helicopter pilots were the ones who made the mistake.
It's all under investigation.
I understand that. That's why I'm trying to figure out how you can come to the conclusion right now that diversity had something to do with this crash.
Because I have common sense, okay? And unfortunately, a lot of people don't. We want brilliant people doing this. This is a major chess game at the highest level.
When
you have 60 planes coming in during a short period of time, and they're all coming in different directions, and you're dealing with very high-level computer work and very complex computers. And one of the other things I will tell you is that the systems that were built, I was going to rebuild the entire system, and then we had an election that didn't turn out the way it should have. But they didn't build the systems properly. They spent a lot of money renovating a system, spending much more money than they would have spent if they bought a new system for air traffic controllers, meaning the computerized systems. There are certain companies that do a very good job. They didn't use those companies. They used companies that should not have been doing it. No, I think it's very important to understand that for some jobs, and not only this, but air traffic controllers, they have to be at the highest level of genius. Okay.
I want to ask you about the ice skaters in a moment because the U.S. Ice Skating Committee was affected. But first, if I can, the cited FAA text that you read is real, but the implication that this policy is newer, that it stems from efforts that began under President Biden or the Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg is demonstrably false. It's been on the FAA's website. No, it's on the website. The FAA's website. It was there in 2013. It was there for the entirety.
What I read.
It was there for the entirety of your administration too. So my question is, why didn't you change the policy during your first administration?
I did change it. I changed the Obama policy, and we had a very good policy. And then Biden came in and he changed it. And then when I came in 3 days ago, I signed a new order, bringing it to the highest level of intelligence. Please. Quiet.
Welcome back to you mentioned that vision was probably the problem that was at issue in this crash. There's been some reports that one of the pilots in the helicopter may be using night vision equipment. Was there any?
I heard that. We don't know yet. We're going to know that pretty soon. It may change your view plan if you do have the night vision. So it's very possible that could have happened. That would be maybe a reason why you wouldn't actually see as well as on a clear night. You can see sometimes better without it. Had a couple more.
Is it helpful to have your Secretary of Transportation confirmed, and does this intensify your interest in getting other nominees confirmed quickly? Is it helpful to have your Secretary of Transportation confirmed, and does this intensify your interest in getting other nominees confirmed quickly as well?
Well, sure. We want fast confirmations, and the Democrats, as you know, are doing everything they can to delay them. They've taken too long. We're struggling to get very good people that everybody knows are going to be confirmed, but we're struggling to get them out faster. We want them out faster. It's a good question, actually. We've been pushing Sean. Everyone knows Sean for a long time. He got many Democrat votes. But they want to take as long as they can. They ask questions like some of the questions that Peter would ask that were totally irrelevant and not very good questions, but they want to just keep it going. They want to keep it going as long as possible. I was very honored, actually, that you got so many Democrat votes. That was really good.
When I try to meet with the families, and second question, is it your impression that neither training that was done during that time, the training that the helicopter was involved in, is it anything you can tell us about
You
that?
don't know. These are the things that will come up with the investigation. You don't know, but the helicopter obviously was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and a tragedy occurred. Please.
Question about
No, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. You've been critical of the current regulations and you've called for big reforms at FAA. I'm curious, sir,
I made the reforms.
what is your message?
3 days ago, I made
Yes,
them.
sir. What is your message then to the American public in the weeks and months ahead? Should they feel hesitant to fly? And if you could clarify perhaps something that the Defense Secretary said when he said that this helicopter was on a continuity of government mission?
I don't know what that refers to, but they were practicing. They do that. They call it practicing, and they were, and that's something that should be done. It's only continuity in the sense that we want to have very good people, and that has to be in continuity, and that's what they refer to. But it was basically practice, and it was a practice that worked out very, very badly.
On his question, the first question, should people be hesitant to fly right now?
No, not at all. I've not hesitated to fly. This is something that it's been many years that something like this has happened, and the collision is just something that we don't expect ever to happen again. We are going to have the highest level people. We've already hired some of the people that you've already hired for that position long before we knew about this. I mean, long before, from the time I came in, we started going out and getting the best people because I said it's not appropriate what they're doing. I think it's a tremendous mistake. You know, they like to do things and they like to take them too far. And this is sometimes what ends up happening. Now with that, I'm not blaming the controller. I'm saying there are things that you could question, like the height of the helicopter, the height of the plane being at the same level and going in opposite directions. It's not a positive, but no, we're already hiring people. No, flying is very safe. We have the safest flying anywhere in the world, and we'll keep it that way. Thank you all very much. Thank you very much.
I'm at a loss. I am at a loss. We're going to finish up with Tulsi Gabbard's. I'm just, I'm going to be doing some research, but I something tells me that this crash was not caused by a. I can't with. I just can't. He's silly goose. All right, let's go back. Wow.
Has a unique scent and case for
and who has already begun to persecute and kill and arrest religious minorities like Christians in Syria. Why that should be acceptable to anyone is beyond me. It is certainly not in our interest.
I appreciate your answer and thank you. My concern has to do with the tendency to repeat Russian and Syrian, and even in some cases, I think we'll get into in the closed session, Iranian information, and to discount what comes from our intelligence community.
Senator, every American deserves to know that people in our own government were providing support to our sworn enemy, Al-Qaeda. That should not be acceptable by anyone.
Thank you, Senator Kelly, Ms. Gabbard. In conclusion, Senator Warner.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, one of the things I love about this committee, and I know folks who are here for Ms. Gabbard may not fully realize, but this has always been a bipartisan committee. And you know, my friend Richard Burr, who said we always kind of followed the truth. One of the things I was always proud of in the very challenging Russia investigation was, you know, people would come in, they didn't know whether the staffer was a Democrat or a Republican, because we were all looking out for the same thing. Ms. Gabbard, I support and commend you for your service. But we have heard this morning taking some individuals' advice on chemical attacks, not taking American intelligence community that, as we subsequently discovered, had iffy ties, not enough due diligence. We've heard this morning on your trip to Lebanon, you weren't fully aware that the folks who originally paid for the trip had these relations and ties to the Syrian party. I know I've asked you, and I understand on the trip that you said you met with Shia religious figures and you didn't know who were there, who they were. I can understand that, although I can't imagine Shia religious figures that in the Bekaa Valley that didn't have ties. This is being watched by our allies around the world. I think even RT's been tweeting about it today, blasting me. And the men and women of the intelligence community. I don't know how they're going to have confidence that if under your leadership, if somebody else stepped out, that you wouldn't take the same position that you've not walked away from on Mr. Snowden. So I guess my last question, this is one I think was in some of the press, and I believe you and your husband took a trip to Rome last summer. And, you know, I'm not talking about the conference. I think you didn't ask who paid for the trip. I just want to get this off the record right now. Not if you and your husband reimbursed, but did you pay for the trip in the outset, or?
There was
who
a
made the booking?
nonprofit organization that was coordinating with the Vatican to set up this meeting that was centered around peace and security interests in the Western
I'm
Hemisphere.
not going to go into.
That
I
paid
just
for
want
the
to
trip.
just make sure. So you didn't understand your trip was paid for by a gentleman named Pierre Louvarier and the Clementi Foundation?
The nonprofit,
Okay,
my
I just say,
understanding,
this-
was
there is
paid for
extensive records
paid for the trip.
Mr. Louvarier has enormous ties to Konstantin Malovov. I'm mispronouncing his name, but who is somebody that America has sanctioned. I imagine we can get into this in the classified hearing, but again, the due diligence that's required before you take these trips or make these assumptions is something that I find very troubling. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Warner. I would also note that that same New York Times story reported there's no indication that Ms. Gabbard did anything wrong on that trip. Ms. Gabbard, thank you for your time and for your testimony. Thank you, most importantly, for your service to our nation. As I said at the outset, it's no secret that this nomination has generated more attention and interest than most nominees before this committee. We have received a large number of statements, letters, and other such materials in support of and in opposition to Ms. Gabbard's nomination. I will submit all of those for the record. For the benefit of senators, it is also my intention to hold a committee vote on Ms. Gabbard's nomination as soon as possible. Therefore, for planning purposes, any senator who wishes to submit questions for the record after today's hearing, please do so by close of business tomorrow. That is Friday, January 31st, 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Now, let me explain what will happen next. Committee security and Mrs. Gabbard's security will escort her and her immediate party out of this room through the door behind me. Everyone else will remain seated in this room. The Capitol Police will secure that door so no one else leaves this room until Ms. Gabbard has reached her break room in preparation for the closed session. We will convene in that closed session in approximately 30 minutes at 1:10 p.m. This open session is adjourned.
Okay. So that wraps that up. They're going to have a closed session after this, which she will be a part of. I'm assuming that's where they're going to go ahead and ask more specific and more classified information. Got her family there and her in-laws there as well. That's her mom.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you. Let's all see. Woo! Hana.
Okay.
Earlier today, former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard testified before the Senate Intelligence Committee on her nomination to be the next Director of National Intelligence. You can watch the full confirmation hearing tonight starting at 9 Eastern on C-SPAN 2. It's also available to watch on the free C-SPAN Now video app or online at cspan.org.
Okay.
And who has already begun to persecute and kill and arrest
All right, I'm going to like to do just a little bit of research. Hi, Emma. Let's take a look at the FAA website. Okay, pretty basic. This was January 20th, so latest statements. Let's see if there's anything there. Their career page. FAA hiring air traffic. Okay, the window's closed. So these are the requirements to become an FAA air traffic controller. You must be a U.S. citizen. You must be registered for selective service if applicable. So this is only applicable to males born after 1959. You must be at least 31 years old before the closing date of the application period. Have 1 year of general work experience or 4 years of education leading to a bachelor's degree or a combination of both. You must speak clearly. You must speak English clearly enough to be understood. And you must be willing to relocate to any FAA facility based. So that's just the basics, right? So, trying to see if there's any information on the requirements for the specific application. So they have to undergo, they must be in training. So looks like an academy. I don't see a resume. Okay. Trump seeks without evidence to blame DEI and Democrats for the crash. Yeah, Trump seeks without evidence to blame DEI. It's just ridiculous. Plane diverted helicopter that Americans regional Washington logical were you have to be the highest intellect and psychologically superior people were allowed to qualify for traffic controllers, he said, before quoting articles regarding the FAA DEI's push before he took office. Brilliant people have to be in those positions, the president said, diversity hiring couldn't link the crash. He said officials weren't sure led to the collision in which 67 people died. Trump also placed blame on his predecessors, Obama, Biden, and the Democrats put politics that nobody's ever seen. The military helicopter flown by fairly experienced crew members was conducting a required annual night evaluation, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said. At least 2 cases have been found as of Thursday morning. All flights in and out of Washington, D.C.'s Ronald Reagan National Airport were resumed at 11 a.m. Thursday. Video footage from the nearby Kennedy Center appears to show the aircraft conjoining in a fireball. Gosh, that's so sad. American Airlines said in a statement, if you believe you may have loved ones on board Flight 5342, call American Airlines. Those calling from outside the U.S. can visit www.news.aa.com for additional phone numbers. It's just really despicable. Oh, former Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg slams Trump's claims as despicable. At Thursday's briefing, Trump linked to DEI measures and Democrats to the aviation crash. He specifically called out Pete Buttigieg, the Secretary of Transportation under Biden, and back. Looks a tweet. He says, Pete Buttigieg says despicable. As families grieve, Trump should be leading, not lying. We put safety first, drove down close calls, grew air traffic control, and had 0 commercial airline crash fatalities out of millions of flights on our watch. President Trump now oversees the military. President Trump now oversees the military and the FAA. One of his first acts was to fire and suspend some of the key personnel who helped keep our skies safe. Did we hear that? Pete Buttigieg is saying basically Trump, as one of his first acts as president, fired and suspended some of the key personnel who helped keep our skies safe. It's time for the president to show actual leadership and explain what he will do to prevent this from happening again. So, passing the buck. It's scary. Yeah, we've got Maryland Senator calls on Trump to apologize for grotesque remarks. We've just experienced a great tragedy, and the United States has already rushed to politicize it, jumping to outrageous conclusions and undermining ongoing investigations. His comments were grotesque and outrageous, and he owes the American people an apology. 16 minutes ago, 6 members of a figure skating club from Massachusetts, including 2 teenagers, are amongst those died on board and doomed American Airlines flight that crashed into the Army Black Hawk helicopter in Washington, D.C. The passenger jet carrying 64 people crashed midair with the helicopter and plunged into the Potomac River near Reagan's National Airport on Wednesday evening. All 67 people on board both aircraft that crashed down into the Potomac River are feared dead. Fire and EMS Chief John Donnelly said at a briefing on Thursday, and at least 28 bodies have now been recovered from the water. So, teenagers too. So there's an entire timeline. You guys want to take.com. All right. So I will look further into these allegations. I'll be posting something on TikTok Shorts. And then I'll upload to YouTube. But for now, my friends, that is what we've got. Upcoming hearings, Senate committee hearings. I know that Kash Patel, FBI director, also had one as well. This started streaming 3 hours ago, it looks like. His confirmation is also, I think more than anything, there's a lot of drama around his nomination. He is very much a Trump enthusiast. Some have considered him a grifter. He has bought Trump merchandise and that kind of thing, like wine and that kind of thing at like really, really expensive. So it kind of took advantage of that. But yeah, his confirmation is very controversial. I'll be updating and looking into anything else on TikTok and posting some videos on there, and then I'll be uploading up to YouTube. I thank you all so much for your viewership, for your support. I'm trying to get this up off the ground. So any support that you guys could send my way, subscribe, like, and comment down below. Yeah, I want to thank you guys all very much, and I will see you guys tomorrow.